call the meeting to order, and it's just past 6:30. I'll go over some of the meeting logistics. Anyone who's joining remotely, please change your name to be your first and last name. Anyone who wishes to speak, again, we'd ask you to start by telling us your name and where you live. We'd ask everybody to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if anyone who wishes to speak must be called on by the mayor. Once you're called on by the mayor, you may make a statement or ask questions, but we try not to engage in back and forth between the council and the members of the public. And if you speak out of turn, discuss non-germane topics or go on too long, you will be reminded of the need to control your behavior. First item is to approve the agenda. Is everybody satisfied with the agenda? All right, we'll deem the agenda approved. We'll start with general business and appearances. And tonight, because this is designed specifically to be a retreat for the council, we will take public comment at the at this initial general business and appearances item and not thereafter. And we will ask if anyone in the public, in the room or online, wants to be recognized. Steve.
That familiar chirp. I think one thing I want to call to your attention to keep in mind tonight as you think about how you're going to work these meetings. You've got the plan coming up, the city plan, and to work, that will not work with a 3-minute time limit. There's only a handful of people who've spent the necessary hours and hours to come up to speed on those things. And our charter has a provision for anybody to get just request in writing and get anything on the agenda. And that allows a back and forth. So I think we ought to rethink our process about how we, because it's not efficient to just have somebody racing under a clock with a timer chirper going and not be able to answer any questions or get clarifying responses from the council in order to tailor the remaining time. But I think you might need to revisit your time limits in such circumstances, because it makes no sense to have a lot of prepared testimony around specifics. I watched it with regarding the development regs and Mr. Goldman last week. And so I'm just asking you to give some thought to that it's, I'm the one who was hauled out in cuffs for talking more than 2 minutes, but 3 minutes, it feels like you're going through the motions rather than interested in hearing what people have to say, especially when you abruptly cut them off repeatedly. I was glad to see Sandy offer to go to jail to finish her thought. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll just mention, people are always free to send us extensive comments in writing. All right. Next up, we have, sorry. Anybody online? Don't see any hands raised online. Jim.
I would just, rather than do this in our council meeting, which is always jammed, I thought I'll do it right now, and I'll try to do it as quick as I can. I want to give you all an update on, I have been to now 3 negotiations. One of each of our committee. I'm not going to talk about the negotiations. I just want to give you my perspective of our team and what I have seen so far. We've had one of each, so I've sat in one of each: Public Works, Fire, Police. And I want to talk about the main team first of all, Kelly and Sarah and Tanya. I am highly impressed with all 3, and I want you to know that. They are doing a terrific job. Kelly is a tremendous leader. She's the leader and she's just calm and collected and very just steady and, you know, we couldn't have a better leader in my opinion. And remember, I've sat on a lot of these before. She does a great job of keeping it on focus, interacting, how she navigates with the people that are, we're dealing with. It's just wonderful. Sarah and Tanya are excellent support for her. They obviously really know their positions. They all know when to speak up. They do a great job. I mean, these three women are just an incredible team, and I am just honored to be a part of it. And in two cases, they're dealing with all men. And the police have a couple women there, but I am just so amazed at how wonderful they are. I just wanted to let you know that I think they're awesome. I also want to talk about each of our department heads, Eric, Derek, and Kurt. And each of them are awesome in their own way. They know when to speak up. They answer things that the rest of us can't answer. Nobody else can answer. They seem to know when to step in. Everyone, I'm impressed with all three of them. And in the negotiations, I mean, I can't tell you how good of the team the six of them are. Obviously, there's just four at a time. There's, only one department heads there. I can honestly tell you that the weak link of all of them is me. And that's how impressive they all are. It's not that I sit there like a bump on a log. I will speak up if I feel I have something to say, or if I have a question or anything like that, or a comment. I'm not afraid to speak up. But they're, I want to say how warmly I've been welcomed by all of them to be on this team. It's an honor and a privilege to be with them all. I'm welcomed by the opposing people, so to speak. I noticed that the ones that pay the most attention when I speak are their agents, so to speak. They're the people who are representing them. They really pay attention when I speak because they know that they want to hear what a counselor thinks about these. And so I know it's a good for me to be there, even though I'm the weak member of the team. And and I want to just say, Eric, he has a tremendous sense of humor, and he knows when to use it. And I mean, when I came in, he said, "Oh my God, Jim, you've got a perfect haircut for police negotiations." And he looked at me and he said, "But you don't take it down close enough." And I looked at his head and it's like it's polished. And I want to say, no, I just take my thing and go like a lawnmower, and that's good enough for me. But again, I want to tell you, I just want to ease. I think they're representing us great. We have a tremendous team. I'm very proud to be part of them and honored. And I just want to let you all know that this is seeing it from a council perspective, that, none of you are there to see this. And I see in 3 meetings, I think I got a good grasp of the core team, and we are so well represented. So I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the time to say it.
Thanks, Jim.
Welcome.
All right, Jen.
Okay,
Now it's time for a retreat. Yeah.
so actually behind you is a little bit of a strange setup, but there's an agenda right behind Jim written on. It's also the same as on your page, but just a quick review. It'll start out with a little bit of a warm up. There's no notes during that warm up, but just a way to tune your voices from your. Then we talk a little bit at 7 o'clock around council process, the kinds of things that you might want to retain or change in the way meetings you conduct business in the meetings, or the strategies you might use between meetings to work together. A little bit of a break. Actually, no, we're going to do input on strategic planning process. That's a very brief little actual input, not a large discussion item, so that you can articulate the kinds of things that you'd like to see when that process comes up. You're not having to decide or agree on that. But whoever is facilitating that process or trying to scaffold that conversation for you will be able to use that input and really read you where you are. Quick break at 8 o'clock. You can clear your plates then if you like. And then come back and talk a little bit about how you make course adjustments as a group. So for lack of better phrasing, I'm calling it work relationships on the council. And then towards the end, how the city council is supporting staff, you know, to your comments that you're just making. You have a really great team in the city of Montpelier, and it's got a lot of work ahead of it in the coming year. So when you need to make course adjustments about how that work transfers between people and human beings, how are you going to do that? That's what happens after the break. So in the very broad brush, the first half of the meeting is very mechanical. The second half of the meeting is more about working relationships and some of those routines and habits that you might want to take a look at. So the just a brief note, my name is Jennifer Nauer. I've never really said that, I just launched right in. A lot of you know me already, and I really appreciate the conversations that I had with you. As part of prepping for this meeting, I was able to connect with each one of you and hear about some of the topics that you wanted to cover in your conversation today. And you should know there was just a lot of commonality in those topics. So I hope when you saw the agenda, you saw yourself reflected in it. There's a lot of content to cover in 3 hours. And so here's what you can expect from me. There are going to be some items that truly are input only. And you'll probably hear me move to closed discussion and just take those notes as input. And other items where I might actually be asking for short answers, or I might interrupt to see if I've got the gist of what you're trying to say, both as a mechanism to save some time, but also to see if I've accurately understood what you're saying before I start to attach to the next thing that you're saying. So please expect that I'll do that. And it's a relationship. So if I cut you off, there's more that you had to say, fair enough to say so. This meeting the public is welcome to attend in the room, online. One thing that's really remarkably different about this meeting from your usual council meetings, as I understand them, that public comment has been limited to the opening part of the meeting. And so this is truly a conversation just with council members. To that end, I'm aware of this audio. I want to make sure my voice gets picked up, but I'll probably toggle between this table and that podium and these easels in order to have the recording, have the integrity of the experience. But I don't want it to get in the way of me connecting with you. So if you can't see me or if you can't hear me, please let me know so I can get closer to your ears into the part of the matter. Before we go into business, I do want to say thank you so much to each of you to make this commitment to come here in person and back-to-back meetings. It's actually not an easy feat to create time for any sort of council meeting, and I appreciate it. So warm-ups. Kelly, I'm going to include you in this sort of opening question, although I know as council members and because you came here at the table, although I know that in this conversation you'll be stepping back sometimes and then stepping forward when requested. So this first question really is just, you might recognize it from last year, some of you, just one thing you enjoy about your role as a city councilor or city staff. And it might be easiest if we start at one end and then we go around, but we don't have to start at an end. We can start anywhere. Is there anybody who has an initial answer to that question?
I thought about this a little bit, and I mean, I've enjoyed getting to know, people on the council and from I like solving issues, researching and stuff. But it's I like the committee meeting. Isn't that odd? But because they take time, they're like all over the map in terms of timing and everything. But you get to meet a wide variety of people who you learn about their day-to-day, but they're, most of them are really engaged in whatever the topic of the committee is. So it's a really an amazing learning experience, but it just gives you insight into the resources that we have in the community. I mean, it's just remarkable. Been amazing. I really I really enjoyed that part of it.
Go next. So I like meeting with people in unofficial settings. Because when people come to our city council meetings and when they share their ideas, because it's kind of a public meeting setting, I feel that sometimes they don't really share everything that they want to share. So usually I meet whoever reaches out to me from my district or other districts. So then we talk about their perspective and their ideas about Montpelier. And because it's kind of a conversational meetings, I can like hear so many things that I wouldn't have heard otherwise. And it really makes me so close to my community. And I think I really like that part the most. And although my husband said I talk a lot, I think I'm good at listening too. So for him, like I only just talk and like my brain works like I start something here, then go there, then bring back down that. I really believe that I'm also a good listener. Sometimes I hear people say that, oh, listening is not a leadership. It is a leadership. And it's a great start because I learned so many things from people who talk to me. And now I have such a great list when we make a decision or when we discuss things to go and revisit, oh yeah, that's perspective should be also taken into consideration.
What others, something you enjoy about your city council role or staff role? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a little different this time around. The first time it was to become a counselor who didn't do what a lot is done on politics is like not be open to the people. I don't like executive sessions. I don't like anything being swept under the rug. I didn't like not getting information when I was a citizen and being told, just not being told the truth and stuff like that. And so I was on there to try to be a little bit of a different politician. I was very much a maverick in those days. And I just wanted to show the people that somebody wanted to let them know what was actually happening. And rather than, tell them what you want them to hear. And I saw, that's what I felt I got when I was a citizen from politicians. This time, it's a little different. I think after, I took, was a caregiver to both of my parents, which was 12 and a half years, and they both passed, and I settled the estate. I was looking for a purpose in life. And you don't live long if you don't have a purpose in life. And I saw a seat on my district come up, and I said, there's my purpose. Let's get back on the council. Let's be can be my final legacy maybe or something like that. And I have experience. I have a lot of knowledge of the city. I served for 12 years before, and I saw that it seemed like it was a pretty green council. And I thought maybe I can bring some experience and knowledge and be leaned on for that. And so it's more now to be an elder statesman, I suppose you could say. And but for me, it's all about the people. It's all about serving the
And there's
people.
something that I think that's starting to develop here around, it gives you access, sitting on the council gives you access to a lot of different information, the nuances that you wouldn't know otherwise. The invitation to have conversations about things that matter to people and the ability to have really meaningful work in sort of moving some of those things forward.
So,
And there's nothing else like it.
so
How about others? Something that you enjoy about it? Go ahead.
So what everybody said, I really like also, but I like that we're kind of at this intersection of the council and the staff and the public all kind of trying to work together. And I like it best when we have moments where it feels like that communication is actually happening. And sometimes it's on committees. Sometimes it's really feeling like we're partnering with the staff and then all the constituents who come and talk to us and want to tell us what they think and what they want. And then in particular, when somebody comes to me from the public with a problem that involves the city and I can connect them to the right person right away and get something resolved like that, that always feels good.
Connecting people to the conversation and to the resources that we have to direct manage resources. Those of you who haven't spoken yet.
So I was just trying to think of what I was gonna say. What do I like about being on the council?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard. It's a
Yeah.
hard job. It's a hard job that I didn't anticipate it being this difficult. I mean, I work full time, I have kids. And I'm not a politician, so I don't really play that world. I just try to do what's right. So I think for me, what I have liked so far is just, I think being a part of this team, being a part of something, I think is really important as like human beings to be a part of something that makes a difference. So in my real life, I've always worked for mission-driven organizations. So for me, working in the city, trying to make a positive change with the staff, my constituents, the council has been, I mean, that's just like near and dear to my heart. And so I think that's what really gets me up every single morning is like, how can we as a group, working with the staff, working with all of the people in our city to continue to improve where we live. And, you know, having an opportunity to make that happen in any way possible makes me, I mean, that's what I like about it. So, that's all.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'll probably say pretty much the same thing I said last time, which is that I've always, my whole life, professional life has been working in public service, trying to serve people and make things better for people. And I really see, I've always done the same thing outside of work, including a lot of political work, but being on the council and being mayor is really an opportunity to serve the public, to make things better for our community, to solve the problems and be part of making the future for our community.
Yeah, so one of the things I'm appreciating about as these comments build on each other is how intense that job is. When you are identifying the things that people need to change or want to fix or the community is hoping to do. And the effort it takes, and you're sort of, it's like passing a baton from one group to the next group to the next group to move a piece of work forward. Which is exceptional and difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ben,
Yeah, I just love the city. I just love the idea of this place. I love this place. You know, I spent most of my life in Vermont. And in my day job, I work with communities across Vermont on community and economic development. And like, this is the place. This is it. Like this city is, you know, sometimes I think it probably drives all of us crazy, but I really love it. I just love this place. And I feel like I just see the potential for, you know, my kids are here and like, I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to try and do something good for a place that I love. So.
and one of the things I've been really thoughtful about that taps into something that I heard from each person when I was connecting with you before this meeting about sort of what draws you here is that passion, connection, and that it's something that's so vibrant. And I also hear that your time is really, there's so much to do and your time is tight as council members. And so one of the goals I have for you today's work is to figure out how do you engage in those best parts of this job and the difficult parts of this job in ways that you can really just sort of eliminate the unnecessary static and make it as easy as possible to keep passing the baton and moving work forward. I have this next warm-up question. Kelly, we haven't gotten to you yet, though, did we? What's your,
Yes, tough acts to follow for sure. And also, I really love working for the city, you know, that part for me is just one thing, so I really like things that are all my favorite. But I think, what I'll just highlight, and this has been true sort of throughout my career and just sort of the education is that, just the commitment to public service and making a difference and doing that through, through community service. So, you know, I can really see the work that we do as a city, so in the staff, and making sure that we're providing different services. And then no one day is the same. So I really like that too. So I'm just incredibly thankful to be able to do this work.
candidly put, yeah. So this will be a little bit of a challenge, I know, but the second question is a little bit more of a lightning round. It's just one word. Your response is only one word. So, yeah, I know. Here we go, dialing up the brain. So think back to a working group that you were part of that you really enjoyed or found meaningful. What's one thing that contributed to that experience? And if you can distill it to a word, that's bonus points.
Clarity.
Inclusion.
Commitment.
Collaboration.
Yeah, Kelly stole my word.
No repeats. Clarity, inclusion, expertise, commitment, collaboration,
I'll say
Interaction.
respect.
respect.
I was thinking, you know,
Belonging.
yeah, I don't know this thing with inclusion, but I think I little bit something like.
Yes,
That. We belong.
and belonging goes to a very visceral sense of welcome in the room.
Mhm.
Yep, or in the space, wherever it happens to be, you're on the sidewalk or across the front porch. Yeah. I think I missed somebody.
Well, I said. Kelly
Good.
stole my word.
It was collaboration. times two.
Interaction, yeah.
Interaction. Nice work. I was thinking about groups I really enjoyed working with, and one of the elements that I really enjoyed is laughter. And it's not always laughter because things are easy or funny. Sometimes it's laughter because it comes from a place of appreciation. And the feeling that you can't make up some of the things that happen in when there's really a lot of business going on. But to see the human beings on the other side of those situations is precious. So this evening is about setting conditions for producing work that you are proud of as a group. That may mean making intentional adjustments to how you move things through in your meeting spaces. It might set those routines work better for you. It might also mean articulating what you need from each other amid tough conversations and general deliberations to make the best, most informed decisions possible. And I know you're often under a time crunch, so it may also mean about figuring out how to do that efficiently. This setting conditions for producing the work that you're proud of, I hear you in these opening statements, also means fine tuning how the council works with city staff during this particular time and works with each other. So, shall we get into it then? Yes, please. I'm gonna shift. So I feel so far away from you. Let me try this out. Let's see if this microphone picks me up. I think it probably does. Here's the agenda item where we are. We're talking about council process and how to increase effectiveness of exchange and deliberation in meetings. I remember having this conversation with you last year. And so you're not starting from scratch. I have the same thing I'm going to pass out to you just because physically sometimes it's helpful. It's an aggregate list of some of the different ideas that you raised in conversations, but there's also the ideas that you came up with last year, just so you can take a look at it. And Palin, I'm going to pass this to you. I'll bring it up on the screen too. My hunch is that at this particular part of the meeting, it will be easier for me to take notes on the shared screen than it is on easel sheets. And part that's because of microphones, but also it seems like you can see it pretty well. If you can't, I'll shift to easel sheets. That's pretty easy to see. So I have a couple of very specific discussion prompts, but you might just want to review first and just see what's on that sheet. There's nothing too groundbreaking there. I think probably you'll see yourself in those comments. So there's three general categories that you ran into when supporting productive discussion during city council meetings. Time management strategies. Some of you talked about agenda design, like how many items can you actually fit in an agenda at any given night? Time limits maybe for assignments for agenda items. And you also, the third category was preparedness for decision making. And that can include both mechanics, but also your own reflections on when you're ready to push something towards a decision. And even if you feel like you don't have enough information sometimes, still be able to make that next step. We aren't gonna, the first discussion prompt doesn't go here, but there is another category of ideas about how you move work forward in between council meetings. So it does not have to happen in the airspace on Wednesday evenings. And on the last page, I do have the ideas from your 2024 retreat, where you talked about utilizing things like shorter presentations and having some real form around that. You had this idea last year about workshop discussion items, so sometimes differentiating between when you would have queuing up comments in a parliamentary kind of procedure versus when you might workshop something and really have some exchange with the council about something you needed to move forward. We gave it a different name because you were trying to figure out how do you keep the public as engaged as possible, but also make those expectations really clear when you need to really bend into the work as a group and hone in on your options. Your challenge to yourselves last year was figuring out and recognizing when you need to make a decision and then making the motion to do so, and how uncomfortable that can be sometimes. You're also challenging yourselves not to keep bundling up agenda items, and I know that's actually kind of an impossible ask. And yet, the intention was there. So rather, you can look to your note, you can look to your own thoughts, you don't have to look at the screen. My first question for you. When you look at your expectations for supporting productive discussion during city council meetings, where would you suggest process adjustments? And if you have ideas that you don't see listed on that sheet in front of you or on the screen, I'm happy to add them. What are you hoping to change about the way that you move work forward in the meetings? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if this is the time for this, but often we start with, when we reach an agenda item, we start with comments by the council, followed by comments by the public, and I would prefer to go the other way, because someone in the public says might be something that I'd want to comment on. It just seems backwards to me.
You're like, and especially thinking about your earlier comment about the nuances, you want to see what's on people's minds for what people.
Right, I may not have heard from from anybody on that topic until the meeting, so.
I actually just wrote that.
Same thing, yeah, there you go.
Just to switch it and to hear from the public first, and then we have our discussion. So that way we have, as much information we've heard from the staff, we've heard from the public and. Better position.
I don't even know if we've ever done it that way in the past. We never have.
Not that I've been here.
Not in my memory, but there are a couple of questions. One is, are we doing discussion by council? Another thing is questions from council, because a lot of what I try to get at the beginning is, do people have questions about what it means?
We could do questions
So
from
that's sort of,
council and then public comment and then discussion.
Questions from council or for council?
from
from
council.
council.
questions from council, and that's directed at the public or whoever is part of that discussion to answer.
No, whoever is presenting. to
Whoever's
us.
presenting, yeah, so
Yeah, okay.
it's common that people will get a presentation and there's a lot of things, I didn't understand this point, or what are the implications of this other thing?
Right, okay, so you're saying when there's in the instance of a presentation, clarifying questions from council to presenter, then hear from the public and then discuss it with council.
So, I know most of the things we do based on like specific legal rules and like bylaws. I don't know if we can do this, but it would be great if we really create some framework of what the city council meeting is. It's a discussion meeting, it's a brainstorming meeting, it's a decision-making meeting, is it a public forum? I think we do all of them
Yeah.
in one meeting, then that's why sometimes like it is midnight and we are trying to make a decision on a very important item and everybody's brain is like
Right.
really like what, and I have to vote for it, but it is like midnight, right? So I don't know how to do this, but it will be great. Like when I come to meeting, if I knew that tonight, it will be all discussing the items, right? Or tonight, yeah, we will be doing decision making.
Okay, so your suggestion is about for each end agenda item, really being clear about what's the purpose there. Is it discussion? Is it decision? Is it public comment?
Yeah. Also, like generally, what the city council meeting is.
Mm.
Like. Because sorry.
Sorry, no, I
At
don't mean to
work,
interrupt you.
when I attend a meeting, I know what the meeting is. If
Mhm.
it's a brainstorming, right, I go there with all my ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a informative meeting. I just take notes. Sometimes I need to make a decision.
And Carrie.
Yes.
Yes, no,
Yes. And I think we have a mechanism that is sort of trying to do that, but it could be used a lot better. So every agenda item has a memo that comes from staff. And there's a format to it that includes like desired outcome or action or something. And if that could be super, super clear, so if for every item there was, this is a discussion, we just want to hear your ideas, or this is a time for you to ask questions, or we need you to approve this project or whatever it is. And so sometimes we get in that memo section, it says, provide guidance to staff. And I don't always know what that means. And sometimes staff is really good about saying, guidance in this is what I need from you. And other times they're really not. And I feel like sometimes we spend a lot of time kind of figuring out what do you need from us exactly?
Mm.
And so if it were more specific, what kind of guidance or, and then also, oh, no, that's another topic. Sorry.
It's okay if it's another topic, but yeah,
Might have something else.
Because Carrie gave a very great idea. I think maybe we can organize the agenda items based on their goal, right? We can just go all the decision-making ones first. Then later we can
Oh, I see.
focus on all the discussion. Then we can focus on all the like provide guidance or something. So that will be maybe the level of the agenda items.
So I don't know who brought this up in the meetings coming up, but there was a little piece where people were talking about, let's rearrange the topics and how we do this based on what our brain is ready for. Is that what you're talking about right now?
Yeah, like Carrie said, oh, some of the agenda items said it is discussion. So I was thinking all our meetings, like suddenly in front of my eyes, all the agenda items like
Oh, I
discussion,
see.
decision, discussion, then again guidance, then we go back and decision. Instead of like going one goal to the other, maybe if we rearrange the agenda items, all the discussion items will follow by each other. Then all the decision-making items will follow by each other, something like that.
Okay. So still looking at sort of how do you rearrange the topic so that it flows and makes sense, but either way, making sure it's really clear what the objective is at any given time. Yep. Is anyone sitting on a comment? What?
This might not be fully fleshed out, but I think So we're focused on the meetings. Like what Carrie said, this is a little bit more upstream, right? So if we think of this more, like I think of this as like a bigger systemic issue in terms of, you know, the agendas. How do we build these agendas? How do we provide input? What are we actually focused on? And then how do we get that information in those cover sheets? So I feel like the whole system. Yeah,
Actually, like,
Do you
'cause
see where
I
I'm
had my
coming?
question, the question I was sitting on was like, how are the agenda, and I'm new. So like, how are the agendas actually created? Like, I know in Bill's office, there's the board that like shows different topics like in coming weeks, but like, and I know that you, I guess can you tell us how, like, how do you do it? And not only how do you do it, but like, why do you do it the way you do it?
Well, interesting question. A lot of what comes before the council is stuff that departments have been working on over some period of time. And they've gotten to the point where we need to know if we're going to apply for such and such a grant, or we need to know we've got this budgetary question for the sewer plant. And we now have all the information we need. The council is the only person who can make a decision on that. And so those things land on the agenda when they need to be on the agenda. And I said, and of course, any of us can put something on the agenda, but I'll meet with Bill and now Kelly and talk about, you know, weeks of the future, what's coming up. How do we balance a couple of things, including how much time we have in a given meeting and how time sensitive the items are that we have coming up. So we might decide, well, we'll take something that was scheduled for the 23rd and put it out to May 14th, or we do a lot of that. Part of it's a little tricky thing because there are all these other factors that are involved, like if we have a topic that we anticipate a lot of people are going to be coming in to make comments on, we try to get that earlier in the meeting. So people aren't going to show up at the meeting and be waiting till 9:30 or 10 o'clock to talk. Similarly, we might have, I'll use Public Works as an example. The last meeting, we had like 3 different things that were all about Public Works. So we kind of put those together so that Kurt or whoever at Public Works is presenting can get all those done and then not have to wait half an hour or an hour for the last item they're going to be talking about. And Kelly, you may have something to add about how it works.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that, you know, so further on in the discussion too, I did collect some staff comments, and this is one of the items that we were talking about even today. And so really the question is, how do we form agenda items? And so they come from all variety of places, whether it's a request or it's a item associated with our strategic plan, or it's, you know, a specific project. Or, you know, it might be something that is sort of an annualized process that we do, like the budget or the strategic plan or the audit. So depending on, you know, what that is, and we'll usually map out those items that, you know, can be foreseen in advance, like Jack was saying. And then we do try to kind of create a set list. And I'd like your feedback actually on that too, a little bit as we get on in the conversations. I think that we could do some things with that.
What do you mean set list?
So like the order, or which things go together, or, you know, like how the meeting will flow. And so we already started to even talk about some of those things. And then in terms of the actual construction of those agenda items, you know, there's a lot that goes into that, and we're, you know, working on that as a team internally to try to make sure we can front load information so you have it to make good decisions. And so, you know, Bill and I are asking things of departments when they submit things to say, you know,
we might have a question about maybe a budgetary figure or maybe about a process element within an agenda item. So we're trying to review them as they come in before they go forward. And so it's a real collective effort. And there are different nuances to each of the pieces as we develop it.
A couple of other observations are when I've heard someone suggest, I think, well, why don't we do the consent agenda at the end? Because it doesn't take much thought and we can just do it. And the issue is that if something comes off the consent agenda, then we may not have much time or energy to do it. And, you know, we get to the point where sometimes it's late in the night and we know we're not gonna be able to get to everything. And so we'll start taking items off the agenda and pushing them to a later date. But that doesn't make them go away. And so I sometimes we don't have any choice but to do that, but it's important to keep that in mind, that if we can be a little more efficient going in and you're in the early part of the meeting, we may be able to get to more of this stuff. And it's also kind of hard to predict what's going to take a long time and what's going to be fast. And we talk about that at our weekly meeting. Well, this should only take 5 minutes and it winds up taking an hour. And that's not just because someone told us that he would talk for 15 minutes, he wound up talking for 45, but it's because, you know, we're not meeting, we're not caucusing in advance of the meeting to know how people feel. So some things are just unpredictable.
And that you don't know the volume of input that's going to be coming up. So
Yep.
there's this dance between, you're going to be surprised sometimes.
Yeah.
And before that comment, you were talking about trying to find efficiencies where possible with some of the agenda items. It raises a question for me. Do you have a shared vision of where you would find efficiencies? Does the same thing come to mind if you're thinking, oh, these agenda items could typically be shorter? You've never talked about it before, yeah. And it changes based on, okay.
One idea that I have is, and Kelly and I have talked about this, a lot of the time, you know, our department heads are experts on their fields. And so a lot of the time, we might want a crisp and pretty brief presentation from city staff, from a city department head. And it's hard for them to keep it short.
Yeah.
And so,
Hard for any of us to stay short.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep working on that.
So part of what you're saying is when you have presentations, that's one place where people can prepare, but you also might have tools to sort of keep those timelines
Mhm.
predictable.
Yep.
Yeah,
So thinking of process, so Jack and Bill and now Kelly have weekly meetings, and so you're working on the agendas, setting them up. And there are some times where, you know, the council might spend 2 hours on a topic and, you know, maybe the expectation was like, oh, that'll be 10 minutes. So I'm just thinking, is there a way, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm just thinking off my head, is there a way? Do you all meet every week, you're setting the agenda, you're coming up with like, oh, I think this will be quick, this might be a quick topic. Is there like another layer of that process? I know we can't obviously, you know, have too many people, but to layer in council members into that like thought, like on a rotation or something, so that, you know, so the mayor, city manager meeting, you could have 2 other city council members and they're just giving feedback, like, okay, this is what we're hearing, this is what, just some, like a feedback loop of some kind. Like, I don't know what
so
that looks
part of,
like.
well, I think you just said, it. Part of what you're looking for is how can I, as a council member or any council member, be able to give feedback on how much time to put where.
Yeah, like a rotation.
And it could be a rotation, but there might be other ways to give feedback
Something,
too.
I don't know,
Like,
but
But to open up that question a little bit, just to crack it open, what are the different ways that you as council members have to give feedback to each other when you think you're spending too much time or not enough time on an agenda item?
Well, I think that could be done ahead of time. Like, I think we can go way upstream to come up with like a better planning of our agendas. So that we're not in the meeting, we're spending like 2.5 hours on a topic that, you know, someone's like, oh, that should have been in 10 minutes. Like, why is that taking you 2 hours? Like, I think we could.
Here's the facilitator in me saying, I know why it would probably take 2 hours, because one person might think it's only gonna take 15, and the person whose turn it is the next week of the next meeting would have given, it's like a goldfish, would have given it more time. So the question I have for you is still the same. What are the different mechanisms you have? And it might be that council input in the beginning before. What other mechanisms do you have for speed up, slow down, then?
Well, I think like, you know, people make motions and then they're seconded and then there's discussion on the motion. Right? And so I feel like sometimes, you know, I mean, I've only been in a couple of meetings where people have done this, right? But it would be like point of order, where we're no longer discussing the thing that was the motion, right? And so I think that that's one way. But I think like actually what I'm maybe more interested in is the upstream conversation about and thinking about like the different things that I imagine the council does, right? Is like oversight of like, you know, financial responsibility for different things in the city, and we provide oversight and approval for different things. But then there's also the strategy, right? And recognizing the balance of those two things, like there are kind of basic oversight issues that have to happen. You know, the grant needs to be approved for, or they want feedback on this project. But making sure that there's time for both, right? And that if we can agree on what are the issues that we need strategic thinking on, then it's not that I'm just going to use it for an example, for nothing more. But like Country Club Road doesn't come to us when the work has progressed to a certain point that needs a decision from us. It's part of a strategy conversation around our housing agenda that there is a time every meeting where we're talking about that, our strategy, our collective strategy. And so I feel like if we have the nuts and bolts things that need to get done in the weeds, great. But we also need that broken out time that's just for the higher level thinking around strategy and the direction that we want to see the city move in.
And the pieces that you're toggling back and forth is the oversight items, which sometimes can take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Versus saving, reserving time and brain power for strategizing on a policy. You gave a specific example, but
Yeah.
policy agenda.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion, whatever we do, I think it will still take longer discussion because we don't see each other until the city council meeting. Because our bylaws, we cannot meet, like 4 of us, we have to announce as a public meeting. So when I come here, I can only hear other city councilors' perspective at the meeting. That's why I like when people talk and share, even it's alone, because there's no other opportunity for me to share my ideas with other people or hear their ideas. Like I was thinking, I don't want to create like more meetings, but maybe like a pre-meeting, like let's hear each other.
So help me make a connection between, and last year when this conversation came up, people were thinking about how do we get more discussion time to find out what councils are actually thinking? And there was an idea of moving that between meetings. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about more joint council time.
Yeah, but I don't think we can have this unless it's a public meeting. Which means
yeah.
that more meetings.
Right, yeah.
And I don't want to have like more meetings. We are already having like, and sometimes we meet every week because of the season. Yeah, so
when you think about really wanting, I think, tell me if I'm not accurate. I think you're saying, I want to make sure that we move through some items as quickly as we can because I really value the discussion and being able to hear what people are thinking.
yeah.
So where do you find efficiencies in order to create more time for that discussion?
I have a couple of thoughts. One is, taking what Adrian suggested. In our weekly meeting, we could come up with predictions of how much time we expect item on the agenda to take, and actually put those on the agenda that's distributed.
Oh.
And then when we're reviewing the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, we're saying, well, we anticipate this should only take 10 minutes. This is probably a big deal. This will probably be half an hour or an hour. And anyone on the council can
And say, hey, I
have an
think
impact on
everybody's gonna be more.
input on that, or
Yeah.
even if we run through that time, we can say, well, okay, we're at the 10 minutes that we allocated. Are we ready to decide or move on, or do we want to allow ourselves more time?
So here's the question that I've got, whether this is separate or the same. So Adrian, when you were first raising this idea, and just a few moments ago, you were talking about taking turns on different people sort of pitching in and trying to set those assignments. And I think the suggestion you're putting on the table is we'll just keep this the same as usual. So the role of the mayor, the role of city staff, is they come up with the agenda and then they put that draft out. And if any council member sees an assignment that doesn't make sense, then it flags, you have a way to give input. Two slightly different ideas,
Right, but with the same goal in mind.
same goal. Yep, of estimating how long is this thing gonna take?
Yeah,
Yeah, this, I don't know what the context was, but Adrian, at one point suggested that we not do that, not put on the agenda ahead of time, but like at the beginning of the meeting, we all kind of look at it together at one time. I think it might be a little bit more efficient if the mayor and the city manager do that first, and then, you know, we can, like you described, that we can go. Oh, I also want to just say one other thing about what Taylor was talking about, and that we can talk to each other outside of meetings as long as it's not 4 or more of us. And so at different times, as I've been on the council, there's been sort of more or less of that happening. You know, so going out for coffee with another city councilor. That. makes all the difference as well. So we think that's more like that.
And it makes a difference for you in sort of processing and understanding the nuances of what that person is trying to sort or.
Yeah. Yep, sometimes ideas come up in those conversations that wouldn't, because we don't even, you know, this is at a retreat, like, sitting at behind tables making speeches, kind of. We're not really having conversations. So, but we can do that outside of a meeting if it's just 2 or 3 people.
Yeah. And we are already doing that,
Yeah.
right? So, and another thing, it works, but it is not the same, right? 7 of us are in the same room. And also sometimes we receive emails or people send their input and they say, I cannot come to the meeting. Please say this on behalf of me, right? Because you are my representative. So that's why it is important also for public to hear our discussion, because they are learning when we are learning from each other. They are learning what the topic is, what the process is from our discussion. So that's what I was trying to say. If it's a discussion meeting, great, we can discuss like 3 hours. But at the same time, we have to make a decision. At the same time, we have to hear presentations. At the same time, we have to get some information. Some of the things are only informative. So there are everything in a one, yeah.
And part of what you're saying is because there's such a need for those discussions to be educational in some way, or for people to see themselves reflected in it. That's why it takes up more and more time.
Yeah, because people are watching online, people are here sometimes. So everybody's learning, I think, together. And then when we make a decision, they understand why we make that decision. Sometimes like I ask questions, sorry, I told my husband what he says about me, right? So sometimes like I ask questions and then like I can see people, why is she asking this question? Like, because people tell me, please ask this question, right? So it is not only us sitting here as an individual, right? I am representing like 800 people, right?
Yeah.
And even if like 20 of them reach out to me for a specific topic and tell me, please mention this or please learn this,
Here's a
then
question.
suddenly.
Here's a question, Kaylin and Carrie. I hope you jot down that question.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
It might expand. So I have a question about how other city councilors are also handling that pressure, which is because the truth is, like, if candidly, if you have 800 people you're representing, let's just say even a dozen of them came up, it's failing asses for me. If each of you had to do that, you would have a public comment hearing rather, like, that would be the purpose of that discussion item. So you're saying 2 things, I think, at once. One is that, it'd be really useful to have the objective or purpose of each item broadcast, so the public knows what to expect. Are they gonna get educated during this, or are they just gonna watch us deliberate? But there's another pressure that you're pointing out, which is the pressure to represent people who are looking to get their voice into this mix. Is it worthwhile asking, like, is this conversation you've had about how you're managing those?
It might be different for each person, like, that's my type of representing my residents. Some people think that, oh, they elect me, they told me to decide for us, and I will do it for them, right? It might be different. I'm not saying that all of us
No.
should think like that. I'm
Okay,
just like
but that's-
giving an example to show that we might have longer discussions. I think it's inevitable because of this reason.
So here's the question I have for me. The question I have is it inevitable? Or do you have choices, just strategies that you can make around where you put that airtime? And how you allocate it?
Yeah, so this is kind of where I was going.
Okay.
And I think Helen, you did a great job of kind of laying out how sometimes the public needs to be educated and go through it with us. And we can't do that on every single item, every single conversation. So we have to think about when that's really important. And then also the question about public comment and how long people get to speak. It's true, we have these topics that come up sometimes where people have things they want to say, but they also have questions. And we don't do back and forth, which I think is good. I don't want to do that, but we might have an occasional meeting or a time set aside on a meeting where it's really more of like a public forum and we can have it be more conversational and it can be more educational and we can hear more about what people are thinking and they can get questions answered and there can be a little bit of back and forth. But so it's so we're released from the structure of the formal meeting, but not at a time when we're trying to deliberate and make a decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I see what you're saying. That you're trying to make a differentiation between a public forum, when a public forum is needed for a certain topic versus when there's some business that the council really needs to digest and execute as quickly as possible. Or as efficiently as possible. And I think maybe what you're both saying, and I just am hearing it for the first time now, is maybe there are some times that move out of council meetings and it's more of a public forum format before it comes to a council meeting. Is that Johnny, right? What are others?
Maybe, I don't know if that's the best, but it's just a thought. But I do think that what following up on what Pam was saying to be, as we're thinking about how long things take and where things go on the agenda, we're getting really clear about what outcome is intended from this agenda item. Then that can help us sort of think about, is this one of those where they really need, the public really needs to be like kind of in on it with us, or is it not one of those? And do that thinking at the time.
And change up your process accordingly. Yeah, essentially.
It would help me to know before the meeting who disagrees with me on the council. Okay, in other words,
That'd be helpful.
and what their arguments are. And I don't always have time to do that. And it's to sort of poll everybody. I mean, sometimes I know how somebody, you know, that somebody's more or less in agreement, and sometimes I know that somebody more or less isn't, but it's very difficult in the context of a meeting to suddenly hear for the first time an argument from somebody that you haven't thought of before, that doesn't agree with you, and to actually change your mind in the meeting.
Oh, I see. Because those
I
reservations.
might be able to
impact-
change it, you know, next meeting, because I've had 2 weeks to think about it, but if there was a way to sort of poll everybody, sort of a straw vote on stuff before, so we sort of know where are the, you know, where are we at loggerheads and where are we in agreement? I mean, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes it's a surprise. I'm surprised.
I think there's two pieces there. So I think I have a question and I imagine it. So when that happens, you get surprised by someone's reservation.
I
Sometimes,
don't fall out of my chair, but I'm,
well, no,
it's like,
well,
oh,
sometimes.
I wish I had known that before, you know,
So
before the meeting, so we could talk it through.
Sure, so you could talk it through either for the benefit of changing your own mind and how you think about it, or changing the outcome, or persuading. So
Exactly.
those kinds of conversations are what the council meetings are designed to have. But I think part of what you're saying is when it happens in the moment, it's sometimes I actually need a little bit of buffer of time. Like knowing in order to make room for it in my thinking or process it.
Yeah, and I'm not, you know, Alexander Hamilton or Ben Franklin. I mean, I'm not an orator, you know, so my persuasion, my ability to persuade somebody to my side of an issue in a meeting is, you know, pretty close to zero. So I need the time. I need more time.
Given enough time, you can wear anybody.
I
down,
could wear it
right?
down. I could grind it down, yeah.
Okay. Let me see what,
I think that's where those coffee talks come in,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I can't even remember what agenda items, because we've done so much this year, but there could have been something that. I'm not an expert on half the things we talked about, so. I'll call Sal, because I know that you're really good at thinking through land use and construction, and you have really good thoughts about, that world, and so I value you. And so when there's something that is on the agenda, I was like, oh, let me call Sal, because I really want to get your opinion, and I might not have formed an opinion because I don't have all the data, and so I do a little fact searching, and, we all don't agree on everything, which is why we're all here, but I think I like that part of our council is, calling Sally. I've talked to Ben so much. I'm like, well, what do you're an expert in a world that I don't even know about. So, when there's topics on the agenda, I'm like, well, what is your experience? What is your background? What is the data? So that I can educate myself. And then start forming my opinion, and then obviously talking to, just making sure I'm understanding where everyone in this council is at, where their head is at. But those coffee talks, and, we can meet 3 at a time just to, we're not making decisions, but we're learning from each other and understanding where our brains are. So when we come to the meeting, we're not blindsided, oh, this is a terrible idea, I'm voting no, and this is why, and you're like, what? So. I mean, it does take extra time. It takes a lot of extra time, but I think investing ahead of time and having those discussions on, not every agenda topic, but ones that picking and choosing so that when we get to the meeting, it's a little bit more efficient, I think.
So the trend that I'm hearing, and then I'm gonna need some help from other ears in the room about how you would call this out, what you're actually talking about right now, because I might be hearing it differently. I think what you're expressing is one of the hardest parts about this job is when I get surprised by a strong reservation and I'm not quite sure how to orient to it. And either get more information or change someone's mind. So it's hard for me when it pops up spontaneously in a council meeting. Is that what you're saying?
No,
No.
I'm not.
I thought that's what Sal said.
Part of what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And how is that different, Adrian, from what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is when we get the agendas on Friday.
You want to be able to connect with each other to get some more information, because there's certain people you hear to.
I don't wanna go to a council
Okay.
meeting, and this has happened. I've changed my mind in a council meeting before when I was persuaded based on
Yeah.
data or information. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that side of the story. I'm gonna change my vote because I just learned so much from, people, which. Just doesn't feel super great, because that means I didn't do my job in preparing and doing my homework and coming to that meeting with. As much background information as
So,
possible.
I know you've got a comment, Phelan, but I'm just wondering what prevents that from happening now?
Time.
Because that constraint
Yeah.
won't change. Go ahead, Pam.
I think we are doing it.
You are good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are doing it. I think my point is, so sorry. My point is, it's an individual effort.
Yep.
It has to be structural, when, for example, Adrian likes taking initiative and calling people, next person will be on her seat. Maybe that person wouldn't do that. That's not a structural thing. I think we need to create some structure which lets city councilors talk to each other, which is, again, it should be a public meeting. So when this is, I say this because when I started city council,
I think I understand.
we were not used to doing that, right? Because everybody is nice. I used to meet with people, but we were just working other things, not agenda. Then new people came. They are like me, right? So when we have meetings regularly together. But if
But it's
maybe,
ad hoc, it's not.
yeah, if I go leave the city council or sell, maybe next person wouldn't be doing this because of the time,
Okay.
because of the family. Oh, this is not my style. That's why I think it is important to create some individual
Here's a-
efforts. We need to create some
here's a
kind of
question
structure.
For you and for everyone. So what you're saying is it doesn't work always to have it leave it ad hoc because it just feels too informal and sometimes it's hard to break that pattern.
Yeah.
To get what you need. Is that a structure that is there like a group effort to want to make that structure a group structure? Or is it an individual thing where each person, each counselor says, here's my structure that I'm going to create in either my routine or in my routines with others in order to get informed? I think what you're advocating for is make it a group structure. Let's have that discussion.
Yeah.
So
Because
clear.
I don't know how many times I can reach out to people, how many times is comfortable for them.
So I'd love
Right.
to hear.
I call everyone, I invite everyone to a coffee meeting, but do I like sell, like bother
Like you don't. want to
bother
mix
with
people up.
me like every week or Zoom meeting or like a coffee, like, because but can I like do this with every single
Right.
person? Because I don't wanna like dominate their
You don't want to be over, you
space.
don't want
Yeah,
to be overbearing, you don't want to put
Yeah.
on each other. Each of you, if you're having 7 different conversations with all these different people, would be overwhelmed. Because life is already full. And because, here's my challenge. Watching the clock, but also just knowing how groups make decisions, you're not going to be able to, in the time you have even now, to figure out what is that structure that we're all gonna agree to. You don't have time to do that. But you do have time to share the top of mind thought of when you hear this conversation about what would make it easier to connect or get prepared for decisions. What are you hearing so far that has some promise for you? And if you haven't spoken yet, I'd like to hear from you first.
Well, I feel I would be remiss if I didn't point out that some of the things we're talking about, we can't do because of the open meetings law.
And what are
The-
things specifically that you can do and can't do?
Well, the suggestion of, doing a straw poll before
Can't do.
outside of the meeting, we can't do that. We can talk to each other. However, if one person talks to each of the other people
You can't shuttle it.
on a meeting, that's the same as,
It's the same as a group meeting, it's just
Group
happening
meeting, yep.
asynchronously. Yep.
So those are things we can't do.
What you can do is what?
Well, I think smaller groupings that are not a quorum can be done.
can we ask for a special meeting? Like 45 minutes? Because we do sometimes, right? Special meetings during lunchtime.
Yeah.
Can we do that? It doesn't have to be 4 hours,
Mhm.
like half an hour meeting. And who wants to attend, right? If we have a quorum, it is good. If we don't, I think it's not necessary because there will be no decision making. Just to like, I don't know.
I have a
like-
question about the agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Oh,
could help prepare the city staff, right? So, we get the agendas on Friday. We have a lunch meeting on Monday, like a standing meeting. To be publicized, right? 30 minutes, 12 to
Yeah,
12:30.
30 minutes, yeah.
Be selfish. You join, and at that time, we say, hey, I have a question about this. Can we get this elaborated, on Wednesday? Or, I saw the cover sheet, but I have some questions. Like that could be a quick 30-minute check-in.
yeah.
To like resolve some issues before Wednesday. We're not making decisions, but we're seeking clarification. We're providing feedback. Like it's a very quick burst of like 30 minutes. Let's sprint this through, and then that could prepare the city staff.
So you are in a meeting now, so because there might be lots of good reasons that would sort of, but just you can do a straw poll right now. Is the thought of setting up a special meeting or a separate meeting like that, is that appealing? If yes, raise your hand. If it's not, or you're not sure, then
Not every single week, but if we need it, I'm happy, yeah.
what are others of you thinking? The reason I'm doing a straw poll is because it's to sort of get right to the heart of the matter. Like when people think about setting up a special meeting or committing more of your time and calendar to come together as a group, is that going to be your best use of time? Or is your best use of time another avenue, like getting your questions to Kelly about what you might need in advance, or calling Sal if you have a question about an agenda item? Or requesting a special meeting specifically as needed for public education
Yeah.
in a forum.
Or for us, like to learn our perspectives.
Yeah, it's a real question I have.
Me personally, like, I think the way I work is like, I like having individual conversations with people about like, hey, what do you think about this? Or help me understand what you're thinking about this issue. Like the lot there over in M&M Beverage, like, I wish I'd had a conversation with you in advance about that, right? Just to like think more about it. And so I feel like, to me, that's just, I don't know, that's just the way I operate as opposed to like a set meeting every, for a half hour. The other thing I wonder about is, I literally don't know if you can do this or not, but like, if we get the packet on Fridays or whatever, could we email questions to the entire, like, questions, like,
I think you should
or,
email them to the city manager.
okay,
And because if someone has a question about, I don't understand this topic, I don't understand why, whatever it is, email it to the city manager. And assuming it's a factual question, not why is this a good idea or why is this a bad idea? But
that's just it. I was maybe not factual questions, more like philosophical ones, right? Like,
Which can quickly become a meeting topic, and that's why it can't be an email, because that becomes a meeting. Yeah.
but if it's a factual question, there's a good chance that you're not the only one who has that
right.
question. And we know what Bill has done and what Kelly would do is that if they get a question from a member of the council, they'll research it. It may involve asking department heads to come up with more information, and then it'll go out to all the members of the council.
What if it's all public all the time?
But if what's all public all the time?
All the questioning, all the MC, all the back and forth is public all the time.
A lot of it could be through an information request anyway, I believe.
Well, no, I mean live, real time. If
Like
I want
a
to send a
online
question to the
posting
city
forum?
about an agenda, I go to a webpage devoted to that, and I put the question there. And the answers and everybody's comments all go there, so that the year is one long public meeting.
More meetings.
Yes, exactly,
So,
like a Slack line.
I'm not an attorney. I can put that question down, but you definitely need some legal advice around whether that is actually allowable.
I don't see that.
When we try to create more efficient meetings, we create more meetings. For all your meetings.
The hard part,
Well, sort of.
here's what gets tough. Here's what gets tough about that is because any sort of, I think to a point that was just made, any utterance that you make, sometimes it's not, there's a meta message to it just as well as the factual question. And so the meeting and the signals you send each other starts to evolve. So any sort of online forum becomes very work intensive to moderate. I can tell you that from experience, even if you're just trying to swap nuts and bolts kinds of questions.
Give me a little time, I'll grind it down.
So yeah. So if there's if you want me to hold that here, but you definitely need legal.
No, I'll take care of it, thank you.
Were you sitting on a comment, Jack?
No.
Okay. Was anybody else that
Well,
I?
I got one other thing,
Yeah.
like, I want to hear more from folks on council about what they're thinking about particular issues. But I also want to hear from I want us all to hear from experts on those issues. And our staff are experts on those issues, but other experts as well, right? Like just outside perspectives. And just thinking about like all the housing conversations at least that I've been a part of on council, we're like anticipating what developers are going to say or do. I would love to have a developer come in.
Yeah.
That we could ask questions of like, how do you think about this thing? Or, we talk about different planning designations or, various things. I would love to see specialists from the state come in, and ask them those questions, I feel like when I work with the Vermont Council on Rural Development and we go out to communities, they bring experts on subject areas from the state and nonprofit organizations to answer like specific questions. And it's like, why can't we just do that in a public meeting where, if we had Kathy Byer from Evernorth for a half an hour in front of us talking about affordable housing and how the financing of that works. I feel like that's a kind of a moment where we are educating both ourselves and the community, like we're having a common conversation with expertise, because we're not experts. But there are people that are, and I just feel like I don't know, maybe that does happen and I haven't seen it, but that's the kind of thing that like, I would love to like engage with real thought leaders in the state about specific things, like Dominic Cloud from St. Albans about TIF districts. I would love to have a common conversation with you.
So I think I'm hearing you and Palin, those two conversations starting to come together around how does that discussion happen? And it might happen at council meetings or special meetings, but in any case, it's about discussing as a group and bringing in different subject area experts, I think is the specific term you used. So I put it in bold. I'm wondering if there's anybody who looks at that idea and is like, oh my gosh, that just is going to be a can of worms. Carrie.
Not that exactly, but
Uh-huh.
but we don't have time
Uh-huh.
to do that as much as we would like to. I would love to have more of that. So I think that sometimes we should do that. And then other times, it might be a job for a committee.
Okay, so you're saying use
Yeah.
sparingly.
So like, for instance, the housing committee did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Last year, I mean, they heard from everybody and they did a great job reporting it and holding up the reputation. And so maybe it's, yeah, sometimes we have somebody come and talk directly to us, but then other times. We told the committee to do it, and I don't know if we're gonna talk about committees, but I would love to. Talk about how committees work and have them to be able to do some work for us and come back to us with something. I would like us to ask the committee to do something. And provide us with some product or recommendation or something that would help us. But right now, we're just gonna make the committee, I mean.
Yep.
send them off either.
So I think you can check out what I'm writing here, but I'm gonna say it out loud too, is that there's this idea of to use sparingly, sort of these special meetings or using some council time to bring subject matter expertise or make time for that discussion. And when it can't happen here because of time, to delegate to a committee or a subgroup to get that, to sort of shuttle that work forward and then bring it back to the council.
Is the idea of getting that expertise from other people.
Okay, so it could say to research, to record.
I think we offered that before, and I think we did a couple times, right? I don't remember. I forgot.
Yeah,
So you-
like we had, when we were discussing the wastewater plant and PFAS, we brought people from the state and people from Casella there. And this is a perfect example of what I said, send the city manager an email, say, well, okay, I see we've got this coming up next meeting, or see, I know we're expecting this to come up. Could we arrange a time to get so-and-so expert to come talk to us?
Okay.
I love that. I think what I would love more is if we as a group decided what was of interest and importance to us and then brainstormed what is the kind of expertise that's required. Rather than just me being like, I'm interested in this issue, I want this person to come talk. Like if we agreed on what strategy we were pursuing or what the issue was. You know what I mean, Jack? Like we
Yeah.
could do it as a group. I think it'll be more effective.
And when would that happen in the course of a regular meeting? This might actually go to Adrian's point earlier. When do you have the opportunity in a regular meeting to say, I see this coming up and I'd like us to figure out what we need for expertise? Is there a structural component somewhere? Where is it? Where would it happen?
City council reports. For one thing, as I keep saying, anyone can put something on the agenda. And so
So you could be.
anyone can say, I would like to schedule 15 minutes on the agenda to talk about how we get more information about the housing development, or how we can get some more information about whatever it is. And that's a perfectly fine agenda item. Or, Carrie brought up the idea of the cover sheet for each of the items on the agenda. If we have an item on the agenda that doesn't have to be decided that night, one of the things we can just talk about it for a while and then decide, well, what we're really missing here is input from some category of person.
Yeah, and you can
And
schedule.
the next time we take this up, let's bring in a couple of people to talk about it.
So Adrian, hold for just a minute. Sorry. This is a time crunch decision is why I'm saying so. What I have up here is just a little culmination of the idea that you just started to come up with as a group. I wanted to see if there's any big reservations in the way that I've worded it. To use those special meetings sparingly to bring in subject matter expertise. And when there isn't time, delegate to a committee or subgroup. And what you were just talking about is there's a number of ways to get that request to this group. One is to submit it as an agenda item, ask for 15 minutes. Another is to to submit it to the city manager or to ask a question. I know Carrie wants to talk a little bit about committees and work groups as sort of related to this idea for your comment that you just mentioned, but Adrian?
So, I'm struggling with this because I think it's this. So I see this coming up and like to see this on the agenda, but I think we also have an and. So I think the piece that we're missing, and I know what's on our agenda today, but I'd like to see like, I'm not gonna use this word, what do I want to use? I wanna say, be very careful. I think what we're missing is council priorities. And so how do we be very thoughtful and proactive ahead of time? Because things can pop up.
Sure.
And they're gonna always pop up, but we're not in a rowboat rowing in the same direction. Like, we're not being strategic in what we're doing to focus, trying really hard not to use the word strategic planning.
Oh, I see. Well, we are gonna
I'm
go
just
there.
saying out there because I'm struggling. I don't know if we're strategic planning as this, I don't know.
People use that word for a lot of different
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
But I think for us as a council, what are our priorities? What are we trying to work on improving in our city? What are we focusing our very limited time and energy on? So that we're being proactive in that agenda making, so we know exactly what our priorities are, what we're trying to
Sure.
achieve. And then we have those public forums where we bring in those experts because we know exactly where we are, where we want to go in 1, 2, 3 years, and we literally have a roadmap. We know exactly what we want to do. And so we're the driver of those, priorities. And there's always gonna be things that pop up because but what are those things? And I think that's where that helps drive the agenda, and that's where the end is. So I see this coming up, and I would like to see this on the agenda, which is great. But we're missing that very strategic piece of our work where we're actually driving policy to make change as a council.
Okay. So if this council had the opportunity to say, these are going to be our main priorities for this year, and it had time to really vet and as a group kind of say, yes, we buy in. Then you would know how to, you would have something specific and concrete to see that it shows up on the agenda and to pace yourself along. But lacking that kind of cohesive, vetted, prioritizing process, you are a little drift.
So that's my opinion.
So, there was a trend among lots of different, many of you mentioned strategic planning. How does this thing work? And I was pretty clear to say, this is not going to be the meeting where you actually get to pick those priorities because it's not a policy setting meeting. You can give a little input about how strategic planning happens. And we're going to need to move there in a couple of minutes. Not very satisfying. What have I left off the table that, Adrian, that was important in your comment? Anyone can answer because you might have heard it loud and clear and I didn't.
I heard that. I tend to agree. I think if we can come to consensus about if 20 things are important, nothing is important.
Nothing happened.
Right? So if 2 or 3 things are important and the day-to-day work of the city is attended to, then it does give us time to not just put a single thing on the agenda that will be answered in one night, but build a work plan out for how we're even going to wrestle with those complicated, big baggy monster issues.
I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment. Here's the thing I have. It's time management, mostly, and it's trying to figure out all the different ideas that you've raised here. And there's a question mark that we haven't even gotten to, which is the supplemental strategies for preparing and processing outside of public meetings. What are the actions that you can actually rely on each other and yourself for going forward that are gonna help get you a little bit closer? Like the asynchronous work between meetings or the changes you want to make to get something on the agenda. That's what I'm hoping to distill in the next couple of minutes. Because I don't think you're going to be satisfied just having had this conversation, not having clear guidance about where you get your input and if you want to. I can bring those notes back up onto the meeting so that you can see them. I'm just worried it's a lot of words. I can also review out loud while I'm looking through, and if I say something that you don't agree with, you can holler. Our facilitator has some great tricks up her sleeve for prioritizing.
Couldn't it be something as, I don't know, but we've got the city plan, right, that we're going to be adopting that has all these different areas, whether it's economic development, housing, land use, all of it. Right, where I think if we're responsible for looking and approving this plan, right? That if we, in our work of, looking at that plan, examining the plan, approving the plan.
Yep.
Can't we as a council come to consensus or vote or something on like, these are the two parts of the plan that we should focus on for the next year or 6 months?
So I'm gonna add that as part of the next discussion item. It's an idea that you're bringing up around, here's what I'd love to change about the strategic planning process, really clarify what those priorities, policy priorities are gonna be for this year, for this group. It's an idea. I'm not asking you to agree on it.
I mean, I think I will just continue doing what I'm doing.
Which is,
I mean, if I have a question about an agenda item and I know someone's expertise, I'll just gonna call them. I mean, I don't think we have any structures. We're not gonna come up with a structure to, fix that problem. But I think it works. It's not great. It's a huge amount of time, but I signed up for this, so that's what I gotta do. I would like for us to think about the times on the agendas. I think that would be helpful. And, in my work, we negotiate our agenda live, so, if we have the times on there, we can negotiate and move stuff around in real time. I think that seems to work really well. If there's something that we think might take long, I think it would be, we can send, the city manager and the mayor a heads up, like, hey, this is something we're hearing from the community. It might bubble up. There might be more discussion time needed for this, or might have some city staff to provide background, just as, just that two-way communication.
I hate that I have to do this. You're actually doing the job of summarizing what those different options are. And I want to keep up with you, because I do think that as you're saying these things, people need an option to be able to say, yeah, we're committing to this, the other thing. And I'm missing some of it. It just, in that moment, I missed some of it, but I think it's here. So what I'd like to do is just go through this list, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in bold the things that Adrian's mentioned and that you're defining. One of those things is time assignments for time agendas, agenda items. You talked about how agendas are created. And you had some very specific ideas about how that can actually happen. They included things like, help me out, crew. Now I'm
The
going to type.
agendas were being created.
I'm sorry, what?
We just asked how the agenda were, like, the ideas around.
Yeah, so you're going to submit to city council, to city manager, if you have an agenda item.
Yeah, so I think that was one we talked about, and I think the other one, which is more like a systemic change in how we do business, is that council priority and having that be our roadmap. So that's something that we can plan out for the year. There's stuff that always pops up, so that's always an option for council to ask or request an item on the agenda. That's always open.
Okay, now you have to pause it one, sorry. Others can crime in too, like some of these are slightly new ideas as you phrase them, Adrian, like council priorities, ones that can be a roadmap as a suggestion, sure. Very specifically, how agendas get created, you can submit an item to the city manager. You can take a quick look at the start of the meeting to check times and course adjust, right?
Fact, so we could have discussion during city council reports. So that's another avenue.
City council reports, that's right. I can't find where I actually wrote that down.
And also maybe we can check what happened.
Check what happened up.
What happened since we talked about it last year, but we didn't do anything. What were the obstacles? If we get rid of those obstacles, then we will, we had a year,
Yeah,
and nothing has changed. Why? So what happened?
well,
Yeah, I was having the same thought.
Yeah.
When I looked at these ideas from last year.
yes, yeah, they're the same.
Where did it stop, right?
But that's a really authentic question. And I think my process is not serving you very well right now, because I'm trying to track some of these things that you have as front running ideas. And it might be that you don't have to agree to them as much as knowing what your options are. And that I can do is go ahead and put those in bold. Question you're asking now is, we had all these ideas, right? You're saying, I see them on the page from last year. But something got in the way of implementing them, which tells me that the reason, there's a reason why business unfolds the way it does, and there are real reasons. It's not an easy thing to change. There are real constraints that you run into.
Can I ask a process question of just like last year, when you did the summary document go back out to this group and was it revisited at any point during the year?
It went out, but I don't remember talking about it again. I think that's a big problem because some of these things I don't really remember and some I had forgotten what I was reminded by looking at them. So maybe we just need to commit to.
So your
Back
suggestion,
to this.
is there a suggestion about revisiting it?
Yeah.
Like, how would that happen structurally?
I think it would be boiled down to like really specific things, like 3 or 4 things that are identified through this evening or process like this that are memorialized in writing. And then every other meeting, we take 5 minutes, be like, how are we doing on that?
Did we do this? And if you think about what those things are from this conversation, I think you're coming really close to some of them. One of the things I think I've heard is exercise the options you have to inform the agenda.
Oh, I have an idea, but
Is it
I don't
you?
wanna create more job for city staff, but like in the coaching, we observe like coaching sections, like third person
Yep.
and take notes, almost like a rubric, like a checklist. If, like when we are having the meeting, if someone sits there,
Oh, if you had a rubric.
then we can understand what is not working and what's working. It's
Okay,
like a coaching feedback sheet or something. I couldn't explain it well, but I think
I know what you mean.
got it, yeah.
but here's what I was thinking you were saying is that there's sometimes people will use just ways of keeping track, like how many times did someone make a motion? Or ask for a point of clarification. So the next steps is if you were to revisit this, you'd want to know when and how. When and how would you do that?
But Palin, I think you've made a good point. There doesn't have to be somebody sitting back keeping score, but everyone on the council can say, you know, I think we've heard everybody say what they needed to be saying about this. I think we don't need to be talking about this anymore. We need to make a decision. Or we could say, well, we've heard the same point from 3 different people. What are we doing with that? You know, or
To do that.
are we getting are we getting off track? You know, have we spent too much time on this topic for what it's worth? We all have the ability to do that.
I think Cola Hudson and the legislature from Sutton used to say that everything that has been said in every way it could be said. It's kind of still the question.
What's your likelihood of being able to say that to each other in a council meeting?
I wouldn't say it that way.
I mean, say anything, just, or even just signal like, let's revisit how much time we're spending on this.
But Jack, you do this too, right?
Yeah, I try
So-
to do it. And
Yeah.
I don't do it as much as I should probably, but yeah.
You,
We say we did this was worth 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. And then we're talking about it for half an hour, then like, I mean, the
Okay.
time limits we put on at the beginning might help us stick to that.
Part of what you're saying is one of those ideas that you might really want to crystallize is set the, I don't know, the time budget, the minute budget. And then you have a flag for yourself when the timer goes off if you still want to be spending your time intentionally there. Okay. That makes sense. Is there any reservation to that idea? I couldn't tell what that looked like. Okay. That's one way to, in following the suggestions that just come up and keeping yourself accountable because it's structural. The timer goes off and you ask to see if that's if you want to be spending time. What are other ways that you can revisit any next steps you come up with here? A rubric is one. I find myself not wanting to write it down because it's very ambitious, but what are some of the easier like things that you can look for or do that would know if you're on track or not, or intentionally revisit it structurally with a group?
Sometimes in my meetings, we just have we can have like a check-in right? Like an intentional check-in, and we can ask ourselves, I don't know what the question would be, but.
Yeah.
Like a feedback loop, like. I don't know what it would be like, how did we do good on our time today? Let's do a quick check-in. How did that work? Or, it's like a continuous improvement loop. Is this working? Is it not working? How can we improve our structure in our meetings? And we can test a couple things, like we can test the time. We can do it for a couple meetings and be like, is this working? Is it not working? How do we want to improve? But I think even putting it on the agenda as like intentional check-in time. I mean, it could be a little bit more, finesse, but like being very intentional about, focus internally on our structure. I don't think we've never really done that, right? So we're, obviously focusing on our agenda, but I think it's important for us to check in. I mean, it could just be once a month.
Yeah, I'll just put periodically.
Yeah.
If it was periodically, and I think what it requires is someone to have it in their memory and put it on the agenda.
Right.
Is there somebody who wants to commit to doing that? Because you can actually then put it in your calendar and you can get it on there.
We can even use right now we back. Agenda items, we could, go on sort of. It would just be kind of a item.
So you would take accountability for like having that little reminder. Yep, yes.
That's good.
So how often would you want to do that? Yes, if you said it now, telling you put it in the agenda, it will magically appear.
Every other month.
I would also suggest as part of the cure that we all go back and watch a meeting
Oh, God.
on video. Very, very educational. I mean, I've had media training, and the hardest part of media training is when they say, now go and watch yourselves, and fix it,
Yeah,
I'm telling you, go back and watch a meeting
very humbling.
and then fix it,
That's homework.
yeah, worth doing.
When I was first a counselor, I taped all my meetings. The city didn't tape them. I
Yeah.
taped them on I taped them because I wanted to improve my public speaking skills. I taped them because I wanted to see what I was doing wrong, how could I improve? It's cringe, but it's how you get better. And, I'm gonna say some things. I've been listening to everybody else talk, and, first of all, anything that you put down last year that you didn't do, throw it out. It obviously didn't mean anything, so throw it out. I mean, because you're saying, well, gee, looking at the things we had last year and we didn't do this, then it didn't work. So throw it out. Here's how we did things, and man, this is so alien to I'm seeing here things here. I picked up on some things that I really liked and how our second meeting of every new council. The first one was a flock meeting, get people used to being seen on TV. Let them get their feet wet in a meeting. The second meeting was just nothing but, what do we want to work on this year? What are the problems?
We'll
And
segue there in just a minute, Jim. Now, we won't segue into the right priorities, but I do have some input.
no, I'm not gonna say any priorities. I'm just gonna say that's what the second meeting was. What is it we want to accomplish this year? And we agreed upon that, and that became the blueprint that we did the rest of the year on. We didn't really vary off. I mean, yeah, things come up. The hardest thing about being a city councilor, it's not like a regular job where you learn how to do your regular job and you go do it, and it's the same things all the time. It's always unpredictable stuff that comes up that throws you off. It just takes everything up to, like when the street collapsed down on Elm Street. That just threw us all off our game. We had to deal with that. You have to learn how to work on winging it and on the fly. These are skills good counselors develop. How to get sidetracked, but yet wing it, deal with it, but get back on track after. I heard some things what I like was, all right, we have a meeting, it's just nothing but our main goals for the year, and we're gonna keep those goals, and that's what we're gonna try to help. Carrie's thing about, committees. We used to establish a committee to do certain things, just like she said. We put a counselor on that committee that kept that committee on course of what we wanted from it. We didn't want to hear stuff they thought they should bring on it. We gave them a specific mission.
So here's, I'm sorry, Jim, here's part of what came up in the meetings, it's in the note that you probably haven't seen yet, and it's gonna stay in that note, but anyone who is working on the committees. You know, so this idea, many of you different said this, so the committees are a really valuable resource and untapped sometimes, and we can work forward between council meetings, but what's missing is some clarity around all the things that you're just listing. What is their purpose and their decision, and how are they gonna communicate to us? Who's the council member, what's their role in that meeting? So it's here if you need it. I understand there's some of you who are gonna be picking that up and working on it anyways. I've been Taylor and Kelly, I think, on that, and you don't have to answer to it now, but anyway, it's in the works.
Okay, so, because that's how we did committees. We didn't want them straying. They were
Right.
given a mission. The counselor kept them on that mission. They brought the information back to us that we want.
I think we're gonna have some excellent recommendations around committees,
Yeah.
and we're gonna share an update at the next meeting, I think. Yeah,
So,
Jim, I think you'd be happy.
Everybody will be happy.
so, I mean, we stay focused on our things. You're gonna get sidetracked, but the ability to get back on track quickly is something that each counselor has to develop a skill of. That's just the way it works.
So I'm
We
gonna,
would have, let me just say something. I didn't speak at all.
you did, and Jim, in a moment, I'm gonna flex some muscle around getting people back on track, but at this point, we're, I'm letting it fly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We would have, all the councils I sat on would have laughed at 9 o'clock. We would have just laughed. Said, that's just not realistic. And we would have said, no, we're gonna go as long as it takes, and you learn how to pace yourself so that you could go into the night and you didn't get tired. I mean, I know I don't sleep much, I don't get tired. I can go till 1 o'clock in the morning and still make my brain work, because I don't think, my body gets tired, but my brain doesn't. So you gotta condition yourself to. You can't think, we gotta have this done by 10 because of pressure on people. We're making decisions for 8,000 people on tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can't rush these things. They're important. If you don't have the time to do this, you probably shouldn't be on the council, in my opinion. Because it's very serious work we're doing for people. So my feeling is we have to be more focused. But we also have to learn how to, when we get derailed, to deal with it and get back on the main thing. That's how we did things, much different than what I was saying. And we never thought about the time because we knew you just can't think that way because it puts too much pressure.
So it's well said, Jim, and part of what you're, I think underscoring is the importance of some group expectations and shared norms about how you're gonna move the time, how long the meeting's gonna last, so that you can calibrate yourself accordingly. And if you know that a decision is upcoming and it's gonna require more time, each person knows how to make an informed decision about what they're gonna be available for. And that's part of what tonight is all about. I do think you have a couple components from the conversation we just had that are crystal clear enough to carry forward. One of them is about your input and how to get input onto the agenda so that you can be setting some time on the topics that you wish. You have a strategy to utilize around estimating times per topic. And then a mechanism to check in and see if that's still intentional time you want to be spending as a group, so you're spending it well. You had a lot of conversation about the difference between maybe having a special meeting or public hearing or forum. Sometimes for some issues that just really require that kind of exchange before it comes to a city council meeting. And you also revisited briefly, although not a lot of specifics, the different options you have for moving work in between council meetings, either using work groups or coffee times or whatever it is, still meeting open law requirements, open meeting law. Those kinds of things I can pull from this. Go ahead.
I want to throw out one or maybe two very specific, concrete things, which is that, I think there are probably more things that we could put on the consent agenda and save time doing that.
Just quick feedback, and when people hear that, what's your initial response? You're kind of nodding as you hear it?
Yeah, they're not in our main goal for that we set in that priority session, they go on the consent agenda. And if somebody wants to take them off, they could.
Okay.
So, and then the second part of that is that, it's very good if people respect the idea of giving advance notice if you want to have something taken off the consent agenda, because a lot of the time, the reason something is taken off the consent agenda is because someone has a question. And if they just send a question to the city manager, they can get their question answered and it doesn't have to come off the consent agenda. But I think there used to be an expectation that you're supposed to ask by Monday to have something off the consent agenda, something like that, but coming in the night of the meeting and asking to take something off the consent agenda slows things down.
Yeah.
Things that deserve full discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm probably interested in putting more stuff on the consent agenda, knowing that sometimes people want to take them off.
To that end too, or something that I think is related is just, we read the packet. Right? And so because come prepared, because we've come prepared. Maybe the presentation from the staff doesn't have to take us long. Because we read what was in the packet. We don't need to hear it again. We can ask questions about what we read in the packet.
That's big, that's big. We used to have counselors that came there, they asked the questions that if they read the packet, they wouldn't have asked those questions. So you said to them, well, did you read the packet? Oh, yes, I did, but you knew they didn't.
So how would you, if you knew that, but this is actually a critical piece, right?
Yeah.
If you have this hypothesis, so that person has not read the packet, how would you actually say that?
Oh, I went after them.
Okay, you just
To
say,
be very honest, I went after them and I singled them out, said, you have not read the agenda and you're wasting our time and I know that. And basically the excuses would start coming out.
so the interest is in saying.
I don't play games like that, okay?
Okay, so fair warning, everybody. But the real gem there is that if you have a hypothesis that someone's not prepared, you have to find some way of getting that feedback to them or asking the question to see if that's actually what's going on. Or if there's something else that's causing that reticence, or if someone's asking a question again that you think's already answered, because they're actually trying to signal something else. Like, I don't really know that this question's been answered. So you don't know unless you ask, which can happen in a public meeting or it can happen.
Well, that was one thing Bill was very good at. He would say, I put that that was in in your packet.
Okay.
And after about 3 times, we all got the message, oh, they didn't read the packet. And that's when I would lay into them and say, you're wasting our time. Get off the council if you don't want to read your packet.
And part of what it does, saying it's in the packet, part of what that does is also flag for someone, actually, I need to be clear about why I'm bringing this up. I'm not bringing it up because it's in the packet, I'm bringing it up because I wanted to ask about. Okay, I am preparing to close this down.
Just on the, what if people from public come on ask questions because they don't read it? Yeah, so we have to answer, we have to have some time, right?
That question, actually, I do have a question about it, because I wonder. How much time do you as a council, can you actually afford to give to all of those questions in a council meeting versus like in a forum?
Yeah, I mean, I think we err a little too far on the side of answering questions that come up. I think sometimes it's a direct yes or no question, and we provide the answer, but sometimes someone will say something and then there will be a response and a long explanation. And I think in the public comment section, we don't. That will get into that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And you also, so, right, you don't want to, you don't have time for those exchanges, and you have some structure to help you out there. But you also have, if you know it's in the packet and somebody doesn't, then one of the things that I've heard in your opening comments is you do appreciate being able to connect people to information, or people raise things that people haven't seen raised. there's a couple mechanisms you have for that. One is connecting and getting the answer. Another is asking your staff, how can this resident get an answer to ABC?
I mean, can I say something about it? Like, as being a teacher.
Yeah.
Like professor. Sometimes people ask questions to understand, even if
Yes.
they have to have a confirmation. And they have to feel that, okay, I got it right.
So
I
the
don't know
question-
why it is like that much, they can ask questions.
Anyone can ask questions.
Yeah, and like,
Well, I think what I've heard though is that you're
it's not
structured
that they
here.
didn't read anything, they don't read.
That's right. And it's a different way of processing and
Yeah,
people think of
exactly.
different things. In your question, the top job that you have as council is figuring out what you can budget time and priority for in order to get other work done, because airtime is precious. I'm thinking a lot of. And so are there other ways to meet the need that a resident might have or that a street might have that doesn't always require, that sometimes means bringing up with a city council meeting and sometimes means going through another avenue because you can see what's on the agenda. Right? I mean, you have different strategies that you can employ.
And again, I want to repeat that if you can do, I really want to see that
Repeat what?
same agenda items that have same goal should get together. Like all the items to be discussed should follow each other. All the items which requires motion and make a decision should go like together. And all
How
the
many-
like informative or presentation, whatever. So we have like a category.
Yeah, that's what you'd like to see. How much support does Phelan have for that idea in organizing the agenda with the quick feeling about it?
Can I ask, can you tell me more about why? Like, why would that be helpful?
So then we have a more focus because now we discuss something, then we go another topic and we listen a presentation. Then we go back and discuss another thing. We come back, make a decision, go back, discuss, go and have another presentation. So it is like that it is really there is no flow, right? And that it is all over the place. But if we have categories, decision-making agenda items, 2 of them, then we can, okay, yeah, it will take half an hour. Discussion will be take 1 hour. I just like making the time. So like a category.
We
Like
did
an
have
open
that a
meeting.
little bit. In our last meeting, we had the Savings Pasture followed by CCR.
That's what I'm, yeah.
And those 2 topics were related and one went into the other. We switched the order because I asked us to, but still. And I think we should put the important items first.
So here's the question I have for you, because at this point, by continuing to discuss that suggestion to see if you want to make it process, what you're going to give up is hearing some of the other things that are on the agenda for tonight. So I don't know if you want to try to fine tune that idea enough, or if that is input for folks who are coming through the agenda to say, I'd like to not jump around quite so much. And for you to be able to make those suggestions as you go. I'm suggesting you do that rather than try to come up with a group structure for your meeting now, because I think you have more valuable things to talk about tonight.
And like from experience, sometimes I feel that we put very important decision-making agenda items as a last one.
Yeah.
And it's like 11:30.
And you can't think about it anymore.
Yeah, let's put all the motion required items, the first ones.
So one
Then we
thing,
can just like make a decision, move, because when we have discussion item, I think we have more flexibility to control the time.
okay, when, I'm gonna say, when you have feedback for the agenda. And someone can fill in the blank. Like, I don't like the order of this, or this should be first. What will you do? When you have feedback for the agenda, what is your recourse? What do you do?
Every meeting includes approve the agenda.
Okay, we will raise it at the end of the agenda.
Jack, is it appropriate, like, I totally get that, but also could somebody send that on a Saturday morning in an email to the full council and city manager?
Absolutely.
Full council or to one single member, like to the mayor or to the city manager?
I don't know,
Um,
because can you discuss like
I'm not
the
sure.
order of the agenda as long as you're not actually talking about the topics?
I'm not sure what the answer to that is. You can
Yep.
definitely send it to the mayor and city manager.
Okay,
I don't know if you can send it to the whole council, but if you send it to the mayor and city manager, we'll talk about it.
And it's an open question. You need some legal advice on it probably, but whether you can send off.
Trying to get things out there as quick as I can.
Okay, I am encouraging you strongly. I can't make you to move on to the next few items because you're gonna regret not getting there.
We take a break.
Yes. Please clear your plates and then when you're ready to come back, please do, because as a time check, it's 8:30 and you were hoping to get out of here at 9:30.
And can I say something before this? I'm just like texting. Please don't think that I'm unrespectful. My son is at the hospital. He broke his finger or something. Or just texting me, and so that's why I'm like.
Well, maybe you should go if you want.
I can't believe that you're this available while that is happening. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so
So
thanks.
5-minute break, 8:37 or so, 8:40, back in the, so let's go. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Couple of lightning rounds. The first one is going to be talking about the strategic plan process, not the plan itself and the content, but the process for it, and getting a little bit of input about what you'd like to see as part of that process. It will be quick. I actually am not asking you to agree on those components. Any person who's then organizing or sort of priming this group for that conversation will have this list to draw from.
Jen, who's doing that?
I don't know.
Do we know?
Probably in-house.
I don't know how you did it last year, but why don't we wrap that up into the conversation?
Okay.
Because not specifically, but you might be saying, we need either a work group or we need someone specific to sort of help figure.
That would be really lovely if we can talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So components for the strategic process, I'm going to ask you to think first and jot notes for yourself if you want, because I think that might make this more efficient. Some of you were here as part of that conversation last year, others weren't. Either way, identify, if you were here last year, you might think, okay, what did we do last year? What's my primary takeaway and what would I change? If you weren't, what are the components I really need from the strategic planning process? What am I expecting from it? I'm going to put these questions up on the screen. I didn't just realize I hadn't done that yet. You're going to see two ideas up there already based on the conversation you just had. Adrian called it a roadmap, so I stole those words and put them right up there. Then it talked about 2 or 3 policy elements from city plan or priorities. I'm going to type as fast as I can, so that I'm not getting caught behind. I'm just looking for your ideas. What components would you like to see? If you have specific changes you suggest from last year, what are they? Go ahead, Carrie.
So the past couple of years I've been here, the strategic plan has been trying to get everything almost in. And we spent a lot of time talking about our priorities and then we kept realizing, well, that's also a priority. That's also important. And it was just a giant thing. And then it would, sort of like nothing was all that important after that. Or if everything's important, then it didn't guide us at all. And so, but this year we have the city plan, which looks a lot like our strategic plans have looked in the past, like very, very similar. And it's divided into pretty good categories and it's got goals and it's got strategies. And I don't want to do that work again.
Okay.
And make a strategic plan. I would like to look at what's in there and say, let's pick a couple of those big ones.
Yeah.
And just say, we're going to really focus on that. We're going to do all the work that the city council needs to do, but we're going to really make special efforts to make, something happen in housing over the next whatever period of time it is.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I agree.
I think we should move away from the word strategic plan. I think the city plan is the plan. We need to measure and monitor it. I think that's like an operational piece. But I would like to come up with a word at some point. I don't know what it is. We're not going to debate it tonight, but like I want us to come up with city council priorities. 1 to 3 for the next, whatever time.
Is it a year? Is that what the whatever time is?
1 to 2, 3 years. I don't know, whatever.
Or longer than
3 years. I don't know what it is, but like the priorities of the council. Yeah, I think moving away from strategic plan would be my,
I think you have to be careful when you go longer than a year because the council will change.
that's why.
Remember what I said, shifting sands.
Maybe it's just, maybe it's, you know, at least a check-in at the year point to be, you know, maybe. There's still consensus around this priority, but
Yeah.
like a check-in.
Well,
And I, you know, and I like the word roadmap too, but in my mind, I think almost like work plan. Right? That like, if you think about the city plan. And that it does have these goals, but then specific strategies, right? That the council could look at those. And say, which of these do we actually have? Not control over, but like that we could add value to. Right? I mean, it's because some of them are just purely staff related things, right? But then there are other ones that are like. Topics that do need discussion or investigation, right? Like more information gathering about, you know. Is this a good idea and who could we hear from to know about it? And then could we adopt that policy, you know? And so that's kind of a work plan based upon the priorities that are identified.
and some of them are fantasy.
And I would have used action plan. If it is okay with everyone, like it is similar to work plan, but because we make a decision and take an action. Maybe, I don't know, city council action plan 1 year. And again, work on it.
One takeaway, oh, you want to keep
I'm ready.
taking?
Yep.
One takeaway from last year is that we developed our strategic plan, we developed all the priorities. The vote for those priorities was unanimous. Everybody on the council agreed. And then we spent the rest of the year hearing one person or another person complaining about what was in our strategic plan. And I think that if people want to be clear, if people are clear on what we want to do, then don't vote for stuff that you don't think we're going to do or we should be doing.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of stuff we can be doing.
So you
And-
want to say, take the time to develop buy-in to whatever
Yeah.
those priorities end up being?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I take full ownership of my part in not making last year's strategic planning process better than the year before. I didn't like it the year before, and at this retreat last year, there was a lot of talk about the strategic plan process is not useful, and what should we do?
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything to try to make it different. But I think we've already got ideas for how to make it, and this is drastically different than what we've done before.
And also, I repeated several times. Strategic plan is not set on the stone. You can always review and change it. I think we missed that part of having a strategic plan. In like private sector, other things, you create something, you regularly go back, revisit, improve it, change it, remove some things. So if we say that, oh yeah, we voted on this, so forever, we will just continue. No, sometimes because of our experience or public input or like the emergency, I don't know.
Yeah.
We should have a flexibility always to revisit. And if you want to change it, you should change, improve, edit.
Okay, so build in time to revisit it or check in.
Yeah, but that puts a lot of pressure on staff because they're going by what you put out there as your original goals, and all of a sudden you're jerking them around and telling them, well, you know, we want to change horses in midstream, and I don't think that's a good way to get things done, quite honestly. I really don't.
I do this in my work.
Yeah,
I'm
but-
not getting upset.
Yeah, but
because
you have
that's
You have a job that's specific. We have things all over the place, so it's more important for us to stay focused on things because we are gonna have interruptions, we're gonna have emergencies, floods, things like that, so I don't wanna think that the staff's put in a lot of time on something, all of a sudden we're telling them, you know, we don't really wanna do that. Because I think that's hard on them.
Okay, so I'm noting.
So Kelly, you can respond to that.
Well, what I'm noting for now is that this puts a lot of pressure on staff with priorities change quickly and to stay mindful of the impact on planning and preparation that's already been invested, right?
That's why I think we are talking about the new perspective. because of all these reasons.
If I just might, so what I'm hearing, is based on what we currently have in place. Like one of the things that, I do realize just based on comments that was, I was thinking, like realignment, but this sounds like a recast. And that's fine, I just think it's being clear about what the intention is and how we would like to do that. I did bring copies of the strategic plan just in case.
We're not gonna look at them now.
I'm not gonna get into comments, that's right. But mostly it's just sort of. It would be really helpful to staff, we can shift course, we can work with you to make sure that we get you what you need. But we also do need to have work plans that are realistic and that are set in plans. And so if we're pivoting to the city plan as sort of a document that we're pulling from, that's helpful. It's just trying to figure out what the frame is and what the plan is. Because this would be a little different, although some of the topics for sure would totally be part of this.
Can you talk just a little bit about, I don't know if this is appropriate time to do this, but if it is, can you talk a little bit about how you operationalize the strategic plan that was done last year? And like how that currently informs how staff uses their time or budgets or anything like that?
Well, I think that there's sort of an ideal version of that, and that's not what we're doing. I think the strategic plan exists, we do use it, you see it on your agenda cover sheets for us to guide us through sort of the items that we're bringing forward and how they relate. We do use it during the budget process to apply certain investments, so just putting your dollars where it makes sense to do so. We do use it to help with staff work plans and then also to identify projects. And so we are doing those things, but based on where we are with the strategic plan and what has come to pass is we're not reporting out to you right now on the strategic plan. We do owe you a report on what that looks like, but it's not maybe where it needs to be at this point. And then we decided last year to do a longer plan, so it's more than 1 year, it's 3 years. And is that really good or not? And I'm kind of hearing not. And so she's trying to figure out how do we, because we also use it as a communication tool to kind of identify the work that we are doing and projects that are on tap. Because from a staff perspective, there are many things that we're working on. We want to make sure we're doing the work of the council and the priorities and bringing those things forward. So it's just, if we shift course, knowing how we're going to do that, because the strategic plan, admittedly, there are a lot of projects and initiatives that are associated with it that maybe are too weedy, or don't necessarily need to be brought to the council's attention per se. But it's just trying to figure out how the plan will be going forward and how we will derive direction from that plan.
And do you think that could the city plan give you that direction?
Potentially, the city plan is also long range, so depending
There's a
on,
lot of very short range stuff in there too.
yeah. So
That's like the actionable part.
Yeah.
I think it, yeah.
So for sure, yeah, so there's definitely overlap, so I think what we're talking about is just if we're not gonna do this strategic plan that we currently have in place, it would be really nice to sort of know that, so we can kind of put it to bed, and it's just, we're not.
How
doing that.
broad is it?
What's that?
It's like the city plan.
Go look
It's
on
It's everything. See,
Almost
that's-
everything.
That's
It's not
too broad.
actually everything.
It's on the
Yeah.
webpage,
It's a
Joe.
lot.
Yeah.
So Adrian.
It's on the webpage.
So I think our strategic plan last time was, 10 miles wide and like an inch deep. And so I think shifting from, really, really specific focused areas, like as we talked about 1 to 3 action items. But I think if we took that approach, I would like for us, maybe not tonight, but to put on our list to think about how we would talk about opportunities that arose that did not align to those priority items.
You mean in council meetings?
Yeah, whatever, like something, I'm just gonna throw this out there as an example. Say our top 3 priority items were housing. Were, say paving or infrastructure and I don't know what a third one would be, whatever, water.
Resilience.
Resilience, I don't know. So the end of those three were like our priority areas, and we laser focused on those. We had work plans. We came up with an entire plan of how we're gonna budget, how we align our budget to those, so it's clarity. It is so clear that this is where our focus is. And then we have all this additional work that happens in terms of operational day-to-day tasks, but what if something came up that was, trying to think of what opportunistic that wasn't aligned to those priorities? How would the council respond to say, not now, because that's not included in our 1 year priority? Like, we have not now.
How would it raise the question of saying, is it worth bumping out one of these other priorities?
Or
'cause it's
something
one
like
the other?
having that discussion, because as you know, Jim was saying, you know, we don't want to move our priorities around all the time because it's confusing to staff. If we have like 3 priorities, but we also want to be responsive to our community if something is brought up, and what are our talking points, or how do we say, well, we're not, that's not part of our priority this year, but we can look at it for years 2 and 3.
So here's how I put it. How do we talk about opportunities or initiatives that arise that are outside of the priority areas?
Yeah.
You're not gonna answer it right now,
Right.
but you'd like to figure that out. And to Kelly's point, clarify how the plan is intended to be used. I think it was Kelly said it, but it might have been Carrie. Clarify how the plan is intended to be used by staff and by council members. How is this document going to be actually used? Therefore, you know the impact if it changes.
Is the document currently used by council
Only in the reporting.
in the cover sheets and reporting?
Yeah.
Part of what you're trying to figure out too is whether these are the city council. You talked a little bit about scope. One says prioritize 2 to 3 policy elements from the city plan to focus on, which is different from creating a priority to-do list and issuing it to somebody else. Because there's policy decisions that you're all weighing in on, and that's where you focus your time versus other things related to those same projects that aren't policy decisions. You've talked about measures, identifying where the council contributes to measures in the city plan versus generating other measures that other people are contributing to.
I think if it's not in the city plan, you don't do it.
And just a sentence about why?
Well, I think that distracts us.
Okay,
I feel like if it's in the city plan, it's been approved, there's been discussion about it, it's a priority. I mean, if something is brought up that's outside this ginormous document that has so many activities and measures in it, I think we would have to ask very strategically why. Like, why would this be a priority that is outside this plan?
But didn't you just mention opportunity might arise that none of us foresee? I mean, but we have to understand, some things might come up that nobody foresees, and we might go, oh my God, we can't let this pass.
But we just have a place to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to
So-
talk about it.
Yeah,
So if,
that's
so
all.
if Amazon decides they want to build a building, you know, move their.
Country Club Road
this year,
is
so Country Club Road, then.
so here's what I'm gonna do, is
Okay.
ask you to really focus on the question again, rather than deliberate all the details, and just, because what this is a little list of things that when it comes time to talk about this, these are the things you really want to clarify. And whoever is designing that for you can help you walk it through, but now is not the time. So you want to make sure that you identify 2 to 3, you've worded a couple of different ways, city council priorities for the year. You've talked about identifying where the council contributes to measures in the city plan. You talked about not calling it a strategic plan, but having other different names. You have noted a couple here. You want to build in a time to revisit it. I think there's a different verb that might be needed there, but to reflect on maybe progress and making adjustments if needed. You want to stay mindful of the impact on staff investment in time. Figure out how you can talk about opportunities and initiatives that would arise that are outside of the priority areas. Specific things that you want to change include taking the time to develop buy-in and commitment to the priorities as they are developed. And clarify how the plan is intended to be used by staff, by council members. Anything on your mind that's not on that list?
Well, one thing that we have often talked about is that the purpose of the city council priorities is to guide how we use our time together, what decisions and what issues require city council input and decision making. And so that's not the same as saying the city council priorities are the only things that the city government is going to be working on, because the city government does a million other things that will continue to do, because that's the responsible city government.
Consent agendas as much as possible. Yeah, unfortunately, we do everything from A to Z except S, which is schools. Everything else is our responsibility and we have to deal with to some degree, but you know, a lot of them just are done year to year and they don't need a lot of thought. We don't need to think about, we need to improve all the highways that we gotta send something into the state for. I mean, that, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you do every year that is just so rote that you don't even have to think about.
Right, doesn't become a priority.
Right.
It's in the routine.
It has to be done and you just do it. And we have staff who know how to do it.
Okay, so I want to make sure you have time to hear from staff, because I think there's some, one of the question prompts just on the other side of the break is about how you all work together and how you work with city staff. So before we go there, is there anything else that you want to make sure is highlighted as components for the strategic planning process or action planning process?
Can you just have a bullet in there? What are the next steps?
What are the next steps? Actually, that's a good question to ask anyway.
Yeah.
So it comes right back to the beginning of where you started. What are the next steps for the action planning process?
I want to hear from other towns too.
Other towns do it.
Yeah, maybe if we can reach their city manager office or who is responsible.
They're online, a lot of them.
Yeah, I did a research. That's what I'm asking, like.
So do you know the answer to how they do it? Like have like a,
It depends. Their vision, right?
Yeah.
But it is important because locally, we are dealing with the same issues. So how their perspective on that. I have so many different people in my network who are serving on the city council or select board. I hear a lot from them. That's what
About how
I'm
they-
just like saying, how about hearing from city staff perspective?
From other cities,
Yeah.
and or I'm gonna reframe it a little bit and say, if you have intelligence from those conversations or ideas that you'd like this group to consider, then finding a way to get into the mix. I think that's what you're saying.
I mean, it just strikes me like thinking about the next steps,
Yeah.
right? Is that like we do have ideas here that are actionable, right? And so at some point, like I think maybe could be even boiled down a little bit more to be like decision points, and then we need to have the opportunity to make decisions like, you know, here's a
Yeah.
list of proposals that came out of this meeting. You know, are we going to agree to these group norms or something? Or I don't know if they're group norms
Yeah,
or whatever, but like these items, you know, is this the way that we're gonna prove? Somebody needs to synthesize that in a document and present it to us that it's like a decision point. I think.
When this happened, I wasn't with you last year when you did your strategic planning process. When does it happen?
We're like a 9-month process.
Last year it was,
Oh, so interrupted.
last year it was a kind of an extended process because, it was. There were people who were new, who didn't really have that much familiarity with what the departments do, and so we brought in all the departments to talk about what they do
Okay,
as part of that process.
let me
And-
rewind then and ask a different question. 'Cause I actually, it's probably less important that I know the answer than I ask. I think the point, I'm gonna refine. Is there a particular time when this usually pops up on your city council agenda already? When in the calendar does it show up?
Right around this time, pretty early in the year,
April, May, so
Yeah.
springtime, so.
we're right around.
And then I kind of rolled through each of the different goals and initiatives. And that was a pretty long process. Because we brought in each of them individually and talked about all the details associated, just to kind of make sure we were capturing everything that was in the plan. And so we did that. And then we adopted the plan, but since that time, I think it's really the way that what is in that plan is just a lot.
Too
So-
much.
Ben, was your suggestion about, I think probably all heard there's a lot of nodding in the very beginning of this conversation about using the city plan as a backdrop or framework. Were you actually looking for a specific, like, this group to say, yes, use the city plan, and yes?
I mean, personally, I think so, yeah. Like, I think it would be great. I mean, I don't know, Kelly, just push back if this is wrong. But like, I think somebody needs to take responsibility for like writing up a decision memo of like, the council's gonna go through a process. We're gonna take a couple different things off the city plan and prioritize those, right? Or, what is the decision point on how we're gonna get, and what I'm hearing is we need a fewer number of things to really focus on.
Yeah.
And so, how are we gonna do that? I think it makes sense for them to, I've heard people talk about the city plan. But like, we need to have like, whether it's dot voting or like a conversation where we talk about I think this is the most important thing. But we need to be able to get to a
Yeah.
place where that's the process that we're gonna go through, and these are the three things.
Yes,
And I
and
think,
that process, I don't think you're gonna design here.
no, I don't either, but I think somebody needs to be responsible for designing that process and bringing it back to us. And I think that might be Kelly, but I don't know.
I don't know, I see.
That would be good. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of, to start the process of need. You all to make the decision.
Maybe you could poll us.
Well, I mean, I think that what I'm kind of envisioning is maybe taking from this conversation, what I'm hearing. Providing kind of a memo and then based on sort of, a summary of the city plan. And then having a meeting that's dedicated to just that.
Yeah.
And then whether or not you would like to have that facilitated or you would like to do that in-house. Is kind of up for discussion.
Well, I think we can do it in-house. I mean, we're all adults. I think we should sit down. Everybody, let's hear what each person thinks is important and see if we can agree and what are the commonalities and move forward.
Taylor,
I have a suggestion. I love to help you to do this. If anyone is also interested in, we can do like a subcommittee like we did for other topics. You don't have to take all the work on you because you're already doing lots of things at the same time. That's why when I mention other towns, I think maybe some people understand I'm talking about their strategic plan. I'm not talking about theirs. I am talking about their process, how they did it. So if it is okay, I can ask my friends who serve on city council and select board, how did they do that process as a group? Maybe you can ask the city managers and how they did that process, and we can create our own process. Then we come that meeting with the prepared. And the subcommittee or volunteer city councilor can help you. We can meet, I don't know, whenever you want to meet. I'm happy to volunteer for that if you want.
the way I have-
Accept.
the way I have it written right now is Kelly will propose a plan with decision points about how the planning process will unfold this year. And I've written, Palin has input about how other groups have conducted their process. I don't know what that actually is going to mean for the memo, if it all comes back to the group or for the two can figure out what you can use and what you can't. I recognize, Kelly, you are in a little bottleneck of work at the moment. And so it might be that some of that comes in and you can only take so much of it.
Yeah, and you can always say, no, I work alone better. Thank you, Penny. Sometimes it happens too, so I understand, no offense, so you can always say that.
It's really helpful actually to have the input.
Yes.
So we'd rather, work through the process and bring something back that we can work together on, and that makes sense to me. I think, so what's being suggested, let me know if this is what you're thinking, is that maybe we'll come up with an agenda item, we'll get this on, but it will sort of have kind of an overview of what we're gonna do so we can take action in open session, and they'll probably likely be one of the suggestions that we can vote that, we'll work together on it. That we get sort of agreement from the council to do that. And I do really appreciate the help because I think one of the things is that, and especially right now, it is so important, is that effectively, whether it is council and staff, we're all one kind of unit. You know what I mean? But we also, I want to be respectful of what you would like us to do, because that's kind of, those are the policy decisions that are not up to staff, that is totally up to council, but to help with the process and making sure that we can get there. So thank you for that, because if we get those, go a long way.
So you'll propose a plan, Phelan has some input, you'll put it on the city council agenda as an item to take action on, estimated time frame. Oh, it's Sal, sorry, I missed, go ahead.
I think some of these planning decisions can be data driven.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Some of the planning decisions that we make, you know, on a strategic
Yeah.
planning session can be data driven or should be at least informed by
Okay,
data. And I don't think we get a historical, you know, perspective on it. So, for example,
I'm gonna,
public health and safety is always an issue. And we get a report every week almost from the police department, and, you know, how many calls they did, and now the fire department started to do it. But we never get a graph that shows whether that's going up or going down. I mean, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
On the emphasis we place on
I see.
these various categories.
You want to be able to see trends. So what I'm writing as a component is you'd appreciate data-driven recommendations where available and the reports in aggregate so that you can see trends or have.
Yeah, and
marked out.
the more measurement we put into a plan, which, you know,
Yeah.
we're talking about adding that as a component, the easier that will be. I mean, it's
Oh, I
also
see.
a load on the staff, so I want to make sure we're not overloading people, but a lot of those decisions, we're just guessing if we don't, you know, but we have data, I think, that can inform some of it.
I'll just add that and budget. So how do we tie the budget to our priorities? So we have data and then budget, which I think would help alleviate some of our budget discussions.
Well,
again.
the data would inform
Yeah,
both.
so I think the data, the budget tied to our priorities. And
Great, yep. So I put those two added to the list and Kelly will work with them. And Palin and anyone else who you kind of bring in to think that through. What else do you need in order to take your next step?
I have what I need right now to be able to formulate something for the board for a discussion item, which is the timeline to do that. I mean, so
Yeah.
looking at the agenda for, you know, our next meeting next week and the meeting after that, they're pretty stacked. But, you know, so when would you like to see it? What makes sense? I mean, I think,
See a special meeting just based on it. Not have any other distractions.
Well, but before we get to that. Process, document,
yeah.
so yeah, I agree that we would definitely need a special meeting, but I think we probably need the agenda item first, so then sort of say, go, and then we'll develop that, bring it back.
I might be crazy, but I suspect that that'll actually be pretty straightforward,
Yeah, and I
right?
don't
Like, I think
feel
you're gonna
like it-
articulate a process and maybe there's tweaks, but I think it'll be pretty good, right? And so we can approve that, I would think.
Yeah.
Maybe on the 14th. The 14th was getting full probably, but
How about I just put a month, okay?
I will aim for the 14th. I will try. I mean, the thing that I just want to be honest about is just that there are a lot of things going on right now.
We're gonna settle those negotiations
Okay.
quick. You hear that?
Okay. So,
But, you know, thank you. That's all, and I will do my best.
so I'm gonna say aim for May 14th. I'll say mid to late May. Yeah. I'm preparing to move you away from this topic if you think it's settled enough for now. Seems
Yep.
like it is. I just need to do a little thinking out loud about how do you want to use your remaining time? You have 15 minutes of what you originally sat down to do. And you have some really important insight, I think, that Kelly, you may not have, I don't know, but I put some time in here for identifying what you might need from staff, what staff might need from you, get requests, just to sort of open up that avenue of how to really make that working relationship work. So,
I'm happy to hear from what staff. We've done a lot of talking. You know, if Kelly wants to talk for a while, I'm fine with listening.
yeah, what it means is skipping an agenda item that I think you're okay with skipping for now. I don't know what choice you have about it. Around what you do as a group when there is an emotional or stressful charge that happens in this meeting and how you swap feedback with each other.
Yeah, you know. We can skip it, but I'd like to just say one thing real quick on that, because I feel personally, I feel like this is a really important issue. One of the things that we talk about, like, what do we love about being on
Yeah.
council? I think one of the things, and I've only been to 3 meetings, but like, one of the things I found challenging is the tone of the meetings and trying to balance like what I think are legitimate questions from the public about different policy decisions or processes or the way that we're doing things. But with like the tone and the vitriol of those conversations and what I consider like personal attacks on staff. And so I just like, I think what I see in communities that are successful in my work are ones where they're collaborative and optimistic. And I feel, unfortunately, right now, I'm not sure we're really there. And I think part of it's COVID, flood, politics. But when we go to meetings and it's vitriol and personal attacks, I think it makes it very difficult for us to do our work well.
Yeah.
I think it's undermines staff. And frankly, I think it cheapens the public discourse and prevents other people from stepping up to serve. And so I don't know what we do about that, but I think we have to acknowledge it. And I think that we have to at a minimum acknowledge it and try to, I feel like the strategy so far has been like, let's ignore it.
Yeah.
And I don't see it getting better unless we really try to come up with some group norms about how are we responding to this? And how are we modeling public discourse?
So there's a question about what do you hope to be modeling for the community about engaging with difficult city issues? Let's use that as our takeaway question. You may not be able to come up with your group norms, but it gives each of you a chance to speak to it.
I just wanted to lay that out there. I don't think it's something, I don't think we have time for it. But I feel like that is fundamental to everything this group is going to do together and the city is going to do together. And so I just feel like we need to revisit it at some point.
And you're mindful that every interaction you have, moment to moment to moment, is amplifying or reinforcing certain elements of how you'd like the city to be operating and how you want to treat each other on the public stage.
Yep.
Whether that person is sitting next to you or in the city staff or in the community. Yes. Palin, and then
Maybe we can put some kind of, I think I mentioned this 2 years ago, something when we talk about meeting rules, something about this, like being polite to each other. It's not only in public meetings, the emails we receive, some of them are horrible.
I suggest
And,
everybody look at the meeting. We've got rules of procedure and meeting norms, group norms. Look at them before we meet again. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
maybe
then we can talk
can
about it if we think we
interrupt
need to be
each other
changed.
while someone is talking. I receive public inputs that because of my accent, sometimes I am being undermined, ignored. So I think we need to, I agree with Ben, we need to talk about these things because we are a role model for the public.
so there's a piece there that, well, there's a couple things to highlight, and it's not lost on me, Jack, that there's some procedures and norms that you can fall back on as a group. And then you might end up having a conversation about where those need to be adjusted. And in the meantime, I think, Waylon, you're underscoring a point that Ben is making, that every interaction that you have here across the table in this council room, but also recognizing that each of you is under an enormous amount of pressure in terms of the feedback and what you get back from the public. And so you are always making choices about what to endorse, what kind of behavior to endorse or not endorse. You need ways of making those adjustments with each other, and they're tender ones. And so when something goes down at a meeting like this or happens in discourse that you don't like, it's really hard to figure out how do you raise that with each other rather than ignoring it, which is a choice on its own. And it's hard to find that time. One tangible thing you can do in taking a step is what's on the agenda item here around what requests you have of staff, what requests does staff have of you, because it gets you a step closer to making sure you have each other as an aligned unit. I don't know if you're gonna have time to do that other work that you're all talking about. And in fact, you might be benefit from priming it a little bit with some pre-work.
So then if you wanna talk, I mean, maybe we can come up with something and bring back. I'm happy, yeah, I'm happy because I personally believe this is very important, what you just told.
It may be the work of your year, maybe one of those priorities of your year. I'm gonna recommend shifting gears. Kelly, do you have input from staff?
Do you have input from staff? And we did talk this morning at our leadership team meeting, and so I do have a few items that folks wanted to bring up, and some of them we've already talked about. And maybe I could also put this in a memo for you, but just briefly, and I go through them if you're interested or not.
What are you trying to
Stay-
do?
stay on.
Do you need me to
Um,
be taking notes during this time?
No, I can get them to you.
I mean, I don't need them, but
So one of the things that we already talked about is, we kind of frame these in sort of asks that you might consider, for staff, and then also things that we wanted to share. Just because they're things that we are really kind of considering and contemplating. So the first one is just, we already talked about this, just pulling items from the consent agenda without warning. It's just more, if we have lead time, then we can better prepare answers, or we can get you what you need, maybe you could stay on the consent agenda item, agenda, so that then we don't have to take it up as an item.
can you just pause after that for a
Yep.
moment to see, because I don't know how, I don't think your list is super long.
No,
When you hear that request, thoughts? Reservation?
Yeah.
100% makes sense.
Okay, and I would love to pause after each one, just so you get a sense of initial impression. Go ahead.
sure. This next one, we talked a little bit about public comment and how you might use public comment to inform your deliberations. Staff, was talking about that a little bit, and thought that it might be good to have public comment only at the beginning of the meeting, just so that the business meeting can continue. So something to consider that is, not necessarily, what was discussed earlier, but, something that might help move things along.
Is that suggestion specifically about limiting public comment to the beginning of the meeting?
Yes,
So people who have comments about items on the agenda would speak only at the beginning of the meeting.
correct.
I'm not asking you to make a decision on that. This is really just here and now, but I think I can almost see the visceral. That needs some discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think it was just more something to save time or maybe even interactions and exchanges. So
We're gonna have to remember it when it comes up. You know what I mean?
Well, let's just have Kelly
I
go
think this is,
through.
I think this is a great thing to talk about or think about, like, I wanna think about
and
that.
that's, I think that's
That's all,
really,
right?
from
Yeah.
a staff perspective, we're just hopeful that, it's considerations. So the next is we've talked about agendas and how we set the agenda, and so working on the strategic plan and having a frame around the things that we bring forward to the agenda would be really helpful. And how some of those agenda items are specific to either the strategic plan or they're planned out well in advance. We've got a roadmap so that then everybody knows, how we're kind of structuring the agenda. So if somebody wants to put something on the agenda, we are certainly there for that. It's just when we have a lot of ad hoc items, their staff wants to cover those items, but then we're also already working on a certain body of work. And so then it's just trying to figure out how to shift the priorities to meet the need. And so as you can imagine, we just want to make sure that we're able to communicate what those priorities are from a staff perspective to make sure that we can then align with the council priorities, because that's what we need to do. But if we don't try to get into alignment, then it creates kind of a back and forth where we might try to do everything. And we're just running up against the times where we just need to be really candid about, like, if we do this, then this might not happen, and here's why. Or here's the alternative.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of conversation.
Is there a request in there or a way that any ideas about how staff would hope that would go?
I think if we knew what council priorities were, we would align our priorities with that.
So there's just general support around getting those priorities distilled and articulated.
Yeah, for sure.
Was there more feedback about ad hoc items or no?
No, because some of the things that come up are really important.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to gauge, what we're working on and, what that looks like. And just, kind of having a conversation about it. And so maybe as we're starting to work with one another as we are looking down the line at agenda items and they maybe get built out into the future. And that totally happens, but sort of absent a workable strategic plan, we may not sort of have that, or having, a council meeting where we are setting those things that you want come the agenda would be helpful, because then we could, engage on those things. We could make sure that we're developing kind of a, speakers that are needed for a particular item, or, whatever the case could be. So it might be helpful to have that kind of meeting or agenda item or whatever.
Yeah, the inform the agenda, or, yep, I forget, one of you had a phrase for it, but someone you talked about, like, group informs this agenda. Item.
For sure. So that would just be really helpful. And I think the thing that is really interesting to me is to kind of hear what you were thinking, and we're in alignment really. It's just more trying to figure out how we can work together on that. The next one is public records policy amendment. So staff just wanted to bring this up because we are getting a lot of public records requests and we are struggling with capacity to handle them. And so we just want to take a look at the policy and make sure that that's good policy for how we do that work.
Is that a agenda item in the future? Or?
Yes.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah.
Wait, if that becomes an agenda, maybe you're already planning on doing this, but if that's an agenda item, would you be coming with a recommendation with like best practices from the League of Cities and Towns or an attorney or something like that? Like, like.
So we have an existing policy, and so we
Yes.
likely would have an amendment to that policy, but we can certainly provide more detail to sort of best practice.
Right. That's what, yeah, I think would be important.
The big ticket preparation, so I just mentioned big ticket because just thinking about the budget in particular and making sure that we have everything that we need for the budget. But also, we talked about strategic planning, but then also, around whether it's zoning or the city plan, just making sure that we're getting you the information that you need when you need it, and how we can help distill that information for you. So any suggestions that you might have for staff and how we would get things in front of you sort of in the off time, just so that, you get the most up-to-date information to work with. So if we can be helpful in that way, please let us know.
What's the specific request?
So, there are some bodies that work that are just big. And I'll use the budget as an example, making sure that everybody sort of has a sense of the anatomy of the budget and how things flow. So that then when you have a question, you can kind of see where you might find the answer, or if you want additional data. Sal asked some really good questions, around the budget, that are really helpful to staff too, because then we're thinking like, oh, okay, here's some,
Okay.
detail.
So the request is, please let staff or let you know what people are wondering around those big items or what they need.
Yes. I promise there are only a few more.
It's a great list.
So then so committee work, so we're really thankful to be working with council on that, because it's definitely an item that we and want to provide the work that's needed, but in some instances, maybe, staff might not have the capacity to serve on a committee. So I think based on what we will probably bring forward as a proposal will be helpful to staff, but what staff wanted me to mention was just staff representation on committees based on capacity.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think council needs to step up more. But at least that's the time, right, so,
That's right. We love committee.
and I'll be helping you out on that. I always took a lot of committees during my time.
Thank you. So then this next one is something that we were just talking about. It's sort of that mutual respect piece and sort of meeting decorum. So like staff has also noticed, we feel that too, when we're in a meeting and it becomes really charged, or there's something that, is just hard to handle and there's work to be done. So it's just trying to figure out what the best way to do that and hold the space for those conversations. And so whether it's the meeting rules or the norms or, how we work through those things together, just will be really helpful going forward, because, we do sense the shift in the discourse. And we really love sort of a collaborative, optimistic environment where we can get things done for the city.
There's I think maybe what you're talking about is the difference between working with content versus how people are starting to feel treated or seen.
Yes.
And that's maybe what others of you have been talking about too, is really just trying to, when you notice that someone is starting to feel the impact of how they're feeling treated, to take the time to tend to it, whether it's in or out of the meeting. And treating that with just as much importance as,
And so, I mean, it's just, I think that'll go, a long way and, thanks for feeling that. And then the next thing, I just think that we wanted to kind of share, there are 2 items, there are more items. We tried to distill our list down a little bit. Those were more like the asks could be considered. These are things, so communications, so, and public information. So we are going to be working on retooling the city manager's weekly. So there will be more sort of information in that from the departments and sort of a where to find things. So to make sure that we're, sort of charting the course and the path. But some of the things that probably aren't going to happen the way that they have been, and this is where we'll start to bring these things forward just so you're aware. And maybe you want us to do these things and maybe not, but like the DPW newsletter has been really great in terms of putting out information about projects and making sure we can get that information to the community. But based on our staff capacity right now, we're likely going to need to shift that weekly memo to either a bi-weekly or monthly installment, just because we don't have the capacity to cover the work in the city manager's office and this publication. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's just more that it's just the reality of trying to figure out what is the best way to get sort of the most information out, in a thoughtful way. So
are there questions about that?
Oh, I like the
support that.
monthly, sorry.
No, so I support that, like, there are times that there are breaking developments that we get out more quickly, but yeah.
So I have a question. I don't know how this would, I mean, I'm all about data. And so when we send out the newsletters, or do you have Google Analytics on the website? Can you see how often these newsletters are accessed? Because I mean, the world I live in, we base everything off Google Analytics. So if only one person has accessed a newsletter in the past year, then we just sunset it, or we try another way to communicate. But if there's, I don't know what the data is, how many people look at these newsletters? I read the city manager's report, but I don't go through all the information. And so it might be a good opportunity to assess the communications if there is data attached to them on what is working, what's not working, and how do we, maybe it is a monthly newsletter. But it's time and effort, right? So if you're putting a lot of time and effort into something, what is the return?
I know as back on the council, it's useful to me. I read everything from top to bottom because I'm trying to get my footing back and I think when you're a new counselor, the more info you get, the better counselor you're gonna be, quite honestly. But I'm fine with bi-weekly. I think it doesn't have to necessarily be weekly. But I think if you go a month, things get lost.
Yeah, you lose the cadence.
I'm probably gonna be in your office. I'm already in there enough, I'm sure.
And I will just add on what Adrian said, we can also, I don't know, probably there are some free version of this, we can check if people open their mails. Right, so we send it digital, do they even go and delete it right away? Or do they read it? So it is because most of the information on our city website anyway. That's why we are duplicating same information over and over and creating more workload. And the other thing, we did a district two very, very basic survey to our residents. And one of the questions was how they learn about city issues, communication. They choose Front Porch Forum, local newspapers. There was no newsletter, there was no city website. I think it's pretty good feedback, like for Porch Forum. Maybe even like, even if sending this newsletter, just create very short post on Porch Forum, like something like that. I don't know, go and click here type of this.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly come up with strategies, and I think that it's also an opportunity for us to really think about the way that we do the work that we do. And so, yeah, and, you know, we'll work on that, and I'm glad everyone's, you know, hearing this too, because this is something that is. very
Porch
impactful.
Forum is free,
Yes,
as opposed to putting it in the bridge or something like that.
It's free as a mechanism, but there's still time behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I know it doesn't cost.
right.
and then
The
this,
other was time and cost.
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely a lot to think about there, and I think one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that it is really important for us to communicate out and get information out and to be transparent. Like that is really, really important, especially right now. And so it's just trying to figure out like how we do that, what that looks like, and just, you know, sort of maybe spitballing, like, you know, what we're thinking and, you know. Like,
Do you have a request? Does the staff have a request?
Not at this point. I think that there will likely be a change to the weekly report, and when that happens, if you could give us your feedback, that would be really awesome. And then I think even just some of the feedback you've given us, Nick, is helpful. So the last thing is, just, I think counselors have been mindful of this, but include the city manager's office on all communications, not because we're trying to monitor, but just because it's helpful to us, and also it's in the charter, but it's, so there's that piece, but it's helpful to us that then we can, you know, help sort of triage information. And so the city manager's office really needs to be the first point of contact, just because, you know, that's, you know, going forward, how we can kind of make sure that we are getting you the information, or making sure the council gets the information all at once, depending on what the request is. So that's just really helpful. I have noticed though that there are instances where, like, for instance, I see something that MCC'd on now that I may not have been in the past, which is really great.
You're talking about all communications to staff?
Yeah, so
Or-
just having them all come through the city manager's office.
Okay.
Or, you know,
CC'd or sent directly to you?
so I think as long as we are aware, but it would be helpful actually if the direct point of contact was the manager's office, and then we would go to staff from there.
Any
for that clarity.
questions? Resignation.
I'm not sure of that request. I mean, are you saying that? It's, you know, I have a question for. You know, one of our staff, so I'm gonna go in directly. And I don't wanna feel like I gotta get permission.
I think the request here actually, right, so you're saying it feels like you have to get permission, like a barrier almost to get.
Well, I don't feel I should have to get permission because
Oh, I
I'm
don't-
city
yeah.
councilors and we're.
Well, but our charter is very clear that the city manager is in charge of the staff and that he can't direct the staff.
Oh, I don't direct, I go ask them for just questions.
Yeah,
that I might
the
have.
exception is for information, the charter
Yeah.
allows for that.
Yeah,
But-
and that's what it is. I'm not there telling them what to do. I wanna ask them some questions about something that I might be looking into. And I don't wanna have to go through staff to do that. I
Well,
mean,
here's the question, is it about, what's the interest behind it? Is it about permission or what's the?
I think it's more general knowledge. I mean, we just making sure that we're aware. We're not looking to sort of sanction communications. But it also is, it's sort of this under element that would carry, not, and like it is actually pretty clear, carry sort of identified as just that, like, the manager is managing the staff. You know what I mean? Like we, Bill and I, or me, I'm your direct connection to the staff. And so to go direct, I don't want to stop that kind of, you know, sort of informational gathering things, the way, if it comes to sort of council asking certain things of staff that, you know, maybe it's something that the council has agreed to and is all good, but maybe it's not. And maybe it's just one counselor asking something of staff. And it gets in this really weird gray area that could be problematic. I'm only
Exact time, yeah.
Yeah, I'm mentioning it just because there's not a problem with it right now. It's more that I just want to make sure that we're aware, I'm aware of those interactions.
Just CCing you, right? The
Yeah.
city manager, that's Just CC, it's not us.
So is it a fair expectation that if anyone goes directly to staff in an email, that at some point city manager will get looped in because it will get.
Yeah, I mean, and Jim, you tell me,
Oh, I know,
like you talk to me, so I'm not, like, that's not,
but
like, I'm not.
I was just thinking of like, yesterday I went and got a tour of the fire.
And they were really
And I-
thankful to have you come see the
Yeah,
fire
and
department.
I just don't wanna feel like I have to ask somebody,
No.
I wanna go tour the fire department. You know,
So that's way different
and our
than,
chief was so gracious, I wanna say that, he was wonderful, welcoming, warmly welcoming, and I thought it was good.
yeah.
I would say to all, you go there, they're very kind.
Yeah, and so I also think that one of the things that will be really helpful to me going forward, especially as we establish our working relationships and establishing those check-ins with each and every one of you, so then we can kind of just talk things through. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not
You
looking for
know I
anything
come to
crazy.
your office, fun.
I know.
But part of the point really is that if one person on the council is asking for information, then it's quite likely information that's relevant to other members of the council.
I want to make sure
And so-
everybody gets it, yeah.
So if there's a question that goes through Kelly to whatever department, Kelly can respond to all members of the council, so everybody knows all the same stuff. And if Kelly's not part of that conversation, then that can't happen.
No, I understand that, but you know, if I'm doing something with the senior center. If I'm bringing a question to go about the senior center, I mean, most of the council isn't really concerned with what I'm doing with the senior center. I mean, if you wanted me to give you constant reports, but. You know, I don't hear from like. Sal sits on a lot of committees, but I don't expect a constant report from him on everything that's reported. on every
And
committee.
that's not what I'm sort of, it's more that like if there's a, something that comes up that, may be helpful for everybody to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll. sort
Plus,
that.
a request for information from staff could be interpreted as a direction to go and get it. You know what I mean? If it has to be compiled or researched somehow, and that's not our place to.
Oh, no,
to
my
direct.
question for staff would not be something that they would have to go and get. It would be something they would be able to tell me right
Yeah.
off the top of it.
I think you started to now circle around on the same understanding, so I don't know that there's anything else to, although it may not sound like it, the request that you've made clear is just for the outcome. Is that lots of times, if there's any person who goes directly to staff, likely city manager is gonna get roped in via email or somehow known, because that's protocol. And the request is where, in most cases, go directly to city manager's office to streamline and make sure that information that needs to come back to the whole council has a very easy. I want to flag just time. I don't know how you're gonna want. to manage it.
Thank you, I was just thinking, that's us, we never.
It's late.
We
So you're over time.
like talking.
Well, yeah, so it's 9:43 to be exact. If you have the tolerance for it, I think there's a question here that might make for a good take around, like a shortened statement from the person. Go back to the kinds of things you're hoping to reinforce, in modeling. Before I go there. Just wanted to put next steps. Kelly, did we give you a chance to finish up? Yep,
That's the list.
that's good. I have those requests here and we can just sort out our notes tomorrow so that we've got a good list of the next steps. Phew. So. Next steps for me, get you a summary note. I'm gonna get another set of eyes on it from Kelly tomorrow. I'll put it together. Jack, I'll CC you as well, so I have 2 sets of eyes on it, and then that'll be available to the entire council. The things that go into that summary note will not be surprising. They're gonna be distilled from the notes that I've been taking online. I'm not inventing anything out of discussion. So you'll see the stuff that was already, it's not even there right now, but was on the shared screen. Cleaned up those, so you're not seeing constant on the list. The next steps were identified and ideas were offered. That's the only next step that I can see generating out of this meeting. You have several that were in the body and I'm not gonna try to find them all, but they'll get written out so you can.
I feel like I heard maybe I'm confusing the steps, but like, I heard about you were to come back to us with a decision memo about
For sure.
process for prioritization of council priorities.
That's a big
That's
one.
true.
Yep.
She'll propose a plan of decision points about how the planning process will unfold this year. Galen has some input about how the groups have done it. Expected in mid to late May. It'll land on a city council agenda item. And while we're on it, there were some next steps that you had around, these ones are gonna be harder for me to find, but exercising options that are available to you already to inform the agenda, and they'll be listed. Setting a time budget for each agenda item, so when it passes, the group has a structural opportunity to recheck. Periodically check in at the end of the meetings, and there's some agenda design inputs. The others are ideas and not next steps, if I see them now. Yep. Yeah. Are you ready for closing comments?
Council reports.
No, I'll give you a discussion prompt, something to think about. Yep. I think probably what you're hearing is my own brain trying to settle in order to land on a clear question. It's my impression that you have covered an awful lot of ground in this meeting. I hope that when that summary note comes back, it's digestible. One change from this year to last, from last to this. You have identified very specific times that the items you talked about in the next are going to come back on your agenda in different formats. And so hopefully this summary doesn't just get lost, but it's embedded. Those other ideas are there for reference. Wow. Did you hear that stomach growl? We all are, have some needs probably to figure out a way to put this conversation in a place where it can settle and sift, and you can then go back into your evening and into your full life. Here's the question for you, the invitation. You can use your closing comments to discuss whatever you want, but I'm going to encourage attention to this. What do you hope to be modeling for the community about engaging difficult city issues? Yeah, I can put it on a shared screen too. What do you hope to be modeling for the community about engaging difficult city issues?
I'll start out.
Sure.
I don't like the draconian 3 minutes that would allow somebody to speak. Especially if there's only 2 or 3 people that want to speak, because we're starting to see a lot of stuff in the country now about free speech being taken away, people being taken off the streets and all that, and I don't have a problem, I don't know why it isn't like 5 minutes. All right, if 3 people want to speak, that's, 6 more minutes. I mean, we never had that when I was a counselor unless we had lots of people in the room and then it was necessary, but. I mean. I think we could, think we would look better as a council listening to people if we gave them 5 minutes. And maybe even a case of 2 people want to speak, but they say, well, I won't speak, but I'll give half of my time to this person because we've talked and he says it better or something like that. But I mean, I just think that, we're here to serve the people. And if they come to the meeting and want to give their time to our meeting, give them a little more time to speak. I can hang around a little longer. I mean, we're that draconian at this point, so that's my comment.
I can add what Kelly said before about transparency. I really want to see more through our communications. I'm not saying that when we put things on our city website, everybody will check it or everybody know where it is, but basically we can say that we did our part. And it is very important to me creating more inclusive process. and get more input from public. Maybe sometimes we make decisions, and we feel that we don't need public input. But I think it is very important to hear from them before we make decisions, because basically whatever we decide, especially budgeting thing or spending money on specific items, we are using their money. So we make decision for them, but it is their resources in the end.
I'll say that directing to your question, I think that, people who live in Montpelier should be able to see the city council dealing with the important issues in a way that, is efficient, is direct, takes into account the needs of different segments of the community, and deals with the members of the community and each other respectfully.
I think. I know, Ben and I have discussed this having our District 1 community meeting, but I think. Getting out there, you know. Talking to our neighbors, posting, like, I would love us to have like public forums, kind of like what we talked about before. Bringing in our partners, bringing in our community members. So, you know, these difficult city issues don't have to be so difficult because we've done our due diligence, we've heard from our constituents, we've educated ourselves and feel confident about making, you know, those important decisions using, you know, taxpayer dollars. So I would like to model that a little bit better. The past couple of months have been busy and I've literally called every single place in Montpelier to host our.
You can do it in my backyard.
We want to host it in a downtown business because that's District 1, but it's like so impossible to find meeting space that, you know, is going to support a local business. If anyone that has any ideas, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to find a space. That's not, you know, the senior center. Nothing against the library, but we're trying to support a local business, to get food and drinks. But, so I think just doing a little bit more of that, kind of heading off, you know, difficult decisions, hot topics, you know, taking that proactive approach. And I think over communication, clarity, and just sharing what we know and gathering input would go a long way.
I would like to model for the community just some like core values of seeking to understand and then be understood. Trying to be able to disagree without being disagreeable, to assume good intent. And, you know, not to be naive, but to be relentlessly optimistic. Because that's, you know, we're in a challenging place right now in our city. And that's, if we don't believe in ourselves and in our city, we're not going to meet the moment. And I just think that like our job as a council is to try and create the environment in which good things can happen. And that, again, I think fundamental to that is the way in which we talk to each other, we interact with the public, and that we model the way in which we make difficult decisions and even disagree about things. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to try to do. And, you know, just like, remember, I'm going to try to remember that my kids watch this. And so, you know, my kids are watching.
Yeah.
I think, you know, a lot of people I talk to who have questions about what the council's doing or decisions we've made have a very sort of either or attitude towards it. Everything is black and white for them. And often after we have a discussion, after I sort of explain the way I'm coming at an issue, which is more of a sort of, you know, everything is sort of gray. They're always sort of walking a line between one option and another. I mean, it tends to diffuse the situation often, but it also contributes to their understanding of the process that we go through when we, when we make the decisions that we make. And it's useful, I think, to, I mean, it worries me a little bit that people are so, I don't know where they get their information. But it's often just really one-sided, and so I think it's important the listening sessions go a long way toward helping people understand all the undercurrents that go into a particular decision that we're wrestling with.
So I would like to model, asking questions first and to try to get greater understanding from each other and from the public. And it kind of goes along with a lot of other people have said, to have those conversations with members of the public and be able to answer their questions, but also to be able to hear. I hear a lot of the same complaints over and over again from people who don't necessarily seem interested in engaging about it. They just want to register a complaint. And there's something in there that I need to learn and hear and understand. So I'm going to try to model that, and I want to model us doing that with each other and being respectful with each other. And I also, I'm not exactly how to do this, but I like our meetings, not just us, but the public and the whole thing to feel positive and constructive. And sometimes we get very bogged down negatively.
I realize that this choice of verb to model, that's a tough one because you're already very aware that you're on a public stage, and that makes it really difficult sometimes to be as imperfect as you have to be when you're trying to do difficult work at 10 o'clock at night. It's a tall ask. And so your remedies and adjustments for each other I think are built all along the summary note that you'll be getting, and they've been sprinkled throughout this conversation. And it has to do with the structural pieces that you put into your agenda and into convenings like this, and also the asynchronous work that you carry forward in your conversations with each other, in your committee meetings, in your conversations, not even with each other, but with the public. Demonstrating interest and commitment and all the things that you talked about in the very beginning of this meeting. So I know, I'm just going to read these words out loud because I know sometimes when you're really craving something that feels positive, the words that you're actually reaching for is around constructive. And there are also these interaction, clarity, inclusion, collaboration, respect, expertise, commitment, and maybe most weighty of all, belonging. So thank you very much for taking the time today to sit with each other. And I will send you a written note of this exchange then tomorrow to Kelly and to Jack, and we'll do it shortly thereafter. Are we adjourned?
Yes,
I don't know if I officially get to do that. So
I get to do that. 9:57. We are adjourned.